In addition to the area where Crocodile and Ayasha are located, Mr. 3's domineering and mighty clones also appeared on other battlefields. At the critical juncture of life and death, he appeared like a hero, successfully resolved the crisis, and blocked the fatal blow for the captain and the cadres. Hive Island, the battlefield of Blackbeard Tina and Hancock. So, you can die for me with peace of mind. Blackbeard Tina's arms were full of veins, and when she wanted to just break the neck of the desperate Hancock, she captured an extremely strong and dangerous aura with her knowledgeable domineering aura. In the next second, a candle soldier with the same appearance as Mr. 3 fell from the sky, and the inflated right arm of the candle had already accumulated extremely hot high-temperature energy. Candle flame breathing. Boom. The astonishingly powerful blasting energy blew up the torn-apart ground, and countless thick smoke rose up, covering the entire battlefield. Blackbeard Tina quickly jumped out of it, and after keeping a safe distance, she fixed her gloomy eyes on the center of the thick smoke. Although it was unbelievable, at a certain moment in the blink of an eye, she really saw that familiar and difficult figure. Sorry, Hancock. In order to elicit Blackbeard's ultimate secret and find the best time to counterattack, I have fooled all of you and made you worry. In the billowing smoke and dust, in order to prevent Hancock from losing his restraint and fall to the ground, Mr. 3 put one hand on Hancock's back, the other hand hooked Hancock's knee, and hugged her in his arms. It's a matter of course. If you are the kind of guy who loses his life easily, then the concubine's vision is too bad. Hancock turned his head sideways, his long black hair still hanging down. The cold and arrogant pretty face gouging Wubo, as if he had expected the current situation long ago. However, how could such clumsy acting skills fool the professional actor Mr. 3? Really? But the way you rushed out desperately for your partner just now, no matter how you look at it. Hancock's eyes became more and more cold, and he interrupted forcefully. How long do you want to hold my concubine in this disgusting position? Almost a real killing intent rushed towards his face. Even though the current Mr. 3 is just a clone of the candle, he still couldn't help but tremble slightly. Huh. Sorry. He quickly let go of his hand and carefully put Hancock down. Mr. 3, you bastard, you are not dead yet. Tina the Blackbeard walked slowly, with a gloomy tone. She saw with her own eyes that Mr. 3 was torn apart, fell to the ground and lost all signs of life. Why now? There are so many Mr. 3 inexplicably appearing on the battlefield. This is totally unreasonable. Miss Tina, look at what you said. Maybe I have the special physique that can achieve the Trinity like you. Mr. 3 retorted. Naturally, Blackbeard Tina couldn't believe such nonsense, and stood there nervously. Her resilience is astonishing. In the short time when the Dark World was broken, she has already recovered a little combat power. But the Mr. 3 in front of him looks like a normal person, domineering and energetic, and she is probably no match for her now. Sister, look carefully, the guy in front of you is just a derivative of the fruit ability, not the real Mr. 3. After realizing the unexpected situation here, Blackbeard Tina gave up chasing Buggy and turned back. As the strongest existence of the three brothers and sisters, she saw through the fake Mr. 3 next to Hancock at a glance. But precisely because of this, the doubts in Blackbeard Tina's heart became more intense. She can be very sure that Mr. 3, who was killed by herself at the beginning, has all the characteristics of a human being except for the abnormality that her physical strength is reduced too fast. At least, that is definitely not a devil fruit ability creation. As expected of a strong man who can leave permanent scratches on red-haired shanks. Candle creator Mr. 3 spread his hands, and did not deny Kina's judgment. Your name is Marshall D. Kina, right? The previous claw hurt me a lot. Thief, ha ha ha. Since you like it so much, then stop hiding and show up quickly. Blackbeard Kina stuck out her tongue and licked the special steel claws, and smiled coldly. This time, I will cut you into pieces of rotten meat. Although she can't figure out exactly what method Mr. 3 used, but with the world's top combat power, she has absolute confidence that she can completely crush the enemy in front of her and turn her bones into ashes. What responded to her was a chuckle from Candle Soldier Mr. 3. As you wish. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room, Mr. 3 made a poochie, a smear of bright red blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Now, I am still very reluctant to control so many delicate Candle Soldiers from a long distance. Excessive knowledge and arrogance and fruit ability consumption caused him a lot of internal injuries. To be stabbed before leaving is really risky to be handsome, so be careful when pretending to be aggressive. Mr. 3 expressed helplessly in a low voice, thinking of the battlefield where the situation was reversed in an instant in the three black beards who showed their faces completely. he burst into a smile uncontrollably. So far, the strategy has been very successful. As a sinister and cunning old Yinbi, without knowing the secrets of Blackbeard's body, the best course of action is naturally to hide in the dark and wait for an opportunity. Therefore, long before the crusade against Blackbeard, he used the ability of the Eternal Wax Museum to create a clone with 80% of his peak state instead of the real body, walking on the bright side. Because it is a system creation rather than a fruit ability, it cannot be perceived through domineering and other means, so there is no need to worry about this clone being exposed. Advancing can be offensive and retreating can be defensive. As early as the moment the war started, Mr. 3 has occupied an absolutely favorable position. Having said that, the harvest of this strategy is really unexpected. Thinking of Buggy, who awakened the ability to split the fruit, and the completion of Crocodile's side mission, Mr. 3 laughed from ear to ear. This is secondary, but the more important gain is that he clearly understands his position among the members of the Cross Guild and in Buggy's heart. Although there is Buggy as an excellent shield in front of him, he can avoid many unnecessary troubles by running the Cross Union while hiding in the dark. But it's impossible for him to push a soft guy who is greedy for life and afraid of death, and will abandon his partner at any time to the throne of Pirate King. In other words, Buggy, who desperately wanted to avenge his brother, succeeded in getting Mr. 3's sincere affirmation. Becoming the nominal king of this sea is no longer his unattainable dream. Mr. 3 didn't stay any longer, stood up, and walked out of the dark room slowly. After passing through an equally dark corridor passage, we came to an open space with bright sunlight. He is in the position of the Crusaders' Black Thief ship, which is ignored by everyone. Mr. 3 jumped onto the bow of the boat, the cool sea breeze blew the cloak behind him, and the entire battlefield of Hive Island came into view. Buggy, whose nose was bruised and face swollen from the beating, immediately saw the return of the king Mr. 3 on the torn-apart skull building. After a brief moment of stupefaction, snot and tears gushed out in an instant, crying in a mess. 3. You bastard. You bastard. You bastard. It's so damn good that it didn't die. Even at a long distance, with the help of the ordinary candle soldier avatar, the domineering and powerful Mr. 3, who is knowledgeable, still captured Buggy's embarrassment. I've been waiting for Captain Buggy for a long time. A raging fighting spirit gushed out from his eyes. Next, let us start the final battle and kill the Blackbeards here. Mr. 3, who appeared on the bow of the pirate ship, greatly inspired many strong members of the Cross Guild on the battlefield. Especially the disheartened little pirates were even more refreshed and burst into bursts of cheers. Look at the pirate ship, the third brother who died is back. That is to say, were all the changes that happened just now in his expectation? He can even control countless candle clones to support various battlefields so easily and casually. What a terrifying man. Mr. 3, who captured their conversation through knowledge and arrogance. Hey, are you fucking blind? Still relaxed and casual, didn't you see the bleeding from the corner of Lao Tzu's mouth? So strong. This is our military advisor, there is no limit. And Mr. Buggy, the whole world is torn apart while talking and laughing, it's just ruining the world. Mr. 3's safe return is like a backbone that runs through the Cross Union, making the pirate boys burst out with great self-confidence and a strong and crazy fighting spirit. Even Crocodile, Doflamingo and other captain-level powerhouses were greatly encouraged, and they let go of their hands and feet fearlessly and prepared to fight. After the previous confrontation between the Chambord Islands and the General Green Bull, many of them know that Mr. 3 has the ability to clone. It's just that there are too many things that could happen with Blackbeard Tina in the Dark World, and the successive appearance of Blackbeard brought them a great psychological shock, which made them lose their senses for a while when they saw Mr. 3's death. Some rational judgments. Of course, the most important point is that after getting along with each other for this period of time, they have more or less formed a bond with Mr. 3. In contrast, Hawkeye Mihawk, who finally joined the Cross Union, seemed much calmer. So, did you know that Mr. 3's death was just an illusion? Kuzan stood on the spot with his hands in his pockets, leisurely, obviously not planning to continue fighting with Hawkeye. When Blackbeard Kina killed Mr. 3, although Hawkeye was stunned for a moment, he was frozen by his fruit ability. But after breaking the ice, he behaved extremely calmly, his breath was steady, and his arrogance remained the same. Hawkeye put the crossed black knife on his back, and said truthfully, "Actually, I didn't expect Mr. 3 to be able to do this. I just subconsciously felt that he couldn't be easily killed, that's all." Hearing Hawkeye's high evaluation, Kuzan couldn't help but nod slightly when he thought of Mr. 3's gleaming posture. That man really deserves your trust.
high in the sky, on a hot air balloon.
Looking at the wonderful picture of reversal in reversal below the battlefield, Morgans trembled with excitement. Death and rebirth, using several clones to instantly overturn the defeated battle situation, bringing an unparalleled sense of oppression to everyone. Ha ha ha. This insidious and cunning guy, Mr. 3, really brought me quite good news material. Morgans kept urging his subordinates to carry out all-round shooting tasks, while he sat on the comfortable sofa, blinked his sharp eyes, and carefully stared at Mr. 3 on the battlefield. At this time, the simple camera lens can no longer satisfy his expectations for Mr. 3. He wants to witness with his own eyes, who is the final winner of this war of the four emperors that is enough to be recorded in the annals of history. On the deck of the Crusader Union pirate ship, Mr. 3 moved, jumped from the bow of the ship, and stepped on the candleland he made. At this moment, the rioting battlefield stopped, and the eyes of the whole audience were watching over uncontrollably, and their nerves were tense. If they don't do this, even they may be overwhelmed by the domineering Mr. 3, who will be stunned for a short time, or even fainted on the spot. Countless thick dark red lightning burst out from Mr. 3's body, his gaze was full of murderous intent, the pressure permeated, and it continued to spread in all directions. Wherever he passed, whether it was the Crusaders Guild or the Blackbeard Pirates, the powerhouses gave way tacitly. In this way, the domineering and raging Mr. 3 moved forward unimpeded, walking straight towards Blackbeard Kina step by step. Feeling the palpitations and arrogance on the Hive Island, the sexy black-bearded Kina said nothing, with an arrogant smile on her lips. The surrounding environment fell into silence at this moment. Sizzle. After a few seconds of silence, a slight dark red arc flashed in front of Blackbeard Kina's eyes, and it disappeared in an instant. Zilla. In the next second, the dense and ferocious dark thunder seemed to tear the world apart, erupting overwhelmingly, exaggerating the coercion and arrogance of the top king to the extreme. Two domineering auras that shook the space collided in the air, creating an unimaginable shocking impact. With the slow progress of Mr. 3, white domineering and black domineering fiercely compete, and the whole world is gradually rendered by two pure tones. Finally, Mr. 3 crossed the candleland and stopped 10 meters in front of Blackbeard Kina. The pure dominance of the two sides collided, and thus reached the peak. This guy's domineering, so strong, almost no different from Shanks. Mr. 3 was secretly startled. He has personally experienced the arrogance of the red-haired Shanks. Although he is much stronger now than he was then, the terrifying coercion in the eyes of the black-bearded Kina is almost exactly the same as Shanks. Mr. 3 tried to continue walking, but the opponent's domineering domain was like an absolute vacuum barrier, squeezing his steps and restricting his movements. In desperation, Mr. 3 had no choice but to quietly retract the calf that was stepped forward, and met Blackbeard Kina's eyes. To be honest, Mr. 3, I thought you were an ordinary character, but I didn't expect to be fooled. Kina, who was bathed in the endless lightning, narrowed her eyes slightly, and noticed Mr. 3's little trick but didn't expose it. The same as the top domineering, the pure collision between the two is difficult to tell the winner, even if she has the upper hand, it is difficult to completely crush. Moreover, Mr. 3 has been recognized by her through a miraculous candle avatar, and is regarded as an opponent worthy of a full fight. In you, I see the figure of the well-deserved overlord of the last era. Looking at the former Shisabukai strongman on Candleland, Blackbeard Kina asked Mr. 3 in a deep voice while maintaining the domineering output. Mr. 3, do you want to become the king of the world like Rox D. Gibbik? After several trials before, she probably understood the overall combat power of the clown buggy. The ability of the fruit torn apart after awakening is indeed quite terrifying. If it is well developed, maybe even the invincible domineering armor will be completely disassembled. But only there. In addition to the fruit ability, Buggy's physical skills are not the same as the three-color domineering. As an intern on the ship of One Piece, Roger, Buggy, at least at this stage, has a huge gap with the red-haired Shanks, so there is nothing to fear. Therefore, Kina with the black beard took it for granted that this domineering man in front of her was the true leader of the Cross Union. The king of the world, it sounds really good, but unfortunately, I don't have that kind of ambition. Because Mr. 3 raised his hand, wanting to help the goggles habitually, only to belatedly discover that the goggles had been damaged in the previous battle. Hearing this, Kina the black beard frowned tightly, showing a rather perplexed expression. Through the arrogance of predicting the future, she detected in advance what Mr. 3 was going to say next. After repeatedly confirming that the results she obtained were exactly the same, her brows frowned even deeper, her face full of surprise. After pausing for a few seconds, Mr. 3 winked at Buggy in the distance, spoke slowly, and said the words that Blackbeard Kina had predicted. Because this era is called Red Nose. The Overlord collision became more and more violent, and Mr. 3 even had to step on the ground hard to resist Blackbeard Kina's domineering suppression. While gritting his teeth and insisting, he winked at Buggy again. The subtext is, "You bastard, Buggy, take advantage of my father's full attention of Kina, so hurry up and give her a blow from behind." The eye waves were quickly caught by Buggy. I don't know if the domineering confrontation between the two was too violent, which caused some errors in the transmission of information. Therefore, Buggy, who was supposed to be familiar with this unique communication method of the Pakistani group, captured the following message: "Don't do anything, let me touch her." The third bastard, even his insidious and cunning personality has changed a lot after becoming stronger. Buggy felt so emotional in his heart, then sat down cross-legged, and nodded heavily at Mr. 3. It probably means, "It doesn't matter, I don't know how to make a move, so you can go head-to-head with that guy to your heart's content." Seeing Buggy's attitude of not wanting to set foot in the domineering field at all, the corner of Mr. 3's mouth twitched. There is no other way. In order to resist the domineering suppression of Blackbeard Kina, he had no choice but to restrain the whole body's domineering energy in his body, and resolutely activate the state of giving up his life with the strongest domineering look. Boom. An incomparably domineering aura spewed out, and the moment he touched it, it shattered Blackbeard Kina's domineering aura. Black fragments flew all over the sky, and the domineering confrontation that made the entire battlefield breathless finally came to an end. However, Mr. 3, who was covered in golden halos, didn't want to stop there. He saw dark red arcs rapidly spreading along the torn-apart ground, forming a special field that could shake the mind and will. It is the high-level domineering usage that restricts the future predicting knowledge color knowledge killing. I didn't expect that you even mastered this kind of method, or is it more reasonable? Blackbeard Kina, who was in the field of knowledge and killing, did not panic at all, but raised her domineering black steel claws, fixed her eyes on the golden energy on Mr. 3, and was ready to fight at any time. Compared with the knowledge killing she also mastered, it is obvious that the strange move of Overlord color burning surprised her even more. Whoosh. After the body skills soared to the limit, the densely bloodshot Mr. 3 oozes out from the surface of the skin and moves. "Are you coming?" Blackbeard Kina also raised her aura to its peak state. But soon, her complexion changed drastically, and she realized that something was wrong. Just as she was about to stop it, a violent explosion sounded from another direction. In the huge pit, the candle flame mixed with golden particles gradually disappeared, revealing the black-bearded Tina in the center who had rolled her eyes and completely lost consciousness. "Sorry, the dark fruit after awakening is very tricky, so before the final battle starts, you must first lose your ability to make trouble." Mr. 3, who succeeded in the sneak attack, glanced at the black-bearded Tina who was lying flat, and immediately felt much happier. He is not an upright partner of justice, even though the one who was attacked and killed was only the candle avatar, but this kind of boring loss must not just be left alone. What's more, the other party violated the agreed two-person world first. Use any means to achieve your goals, Mr. 3, is this your spirit? Looking at her sister who was lying on the ground, Kina with the black beard's expression darkened instantly. Mr. 3 walked out of the deep pit, and said with a light smile, to each other, "If you really want to talk about it, I am not prepared for this trick and I am a sneak attack, but I learned it from you." At the same time, the highly condensed golden halo on his body and the most basic red arc dissipated, returning to the most ordinary state. Because recruiting Hawkeye yesterday consumed a wax figure, plus the candle avatar just now, there is only one wax figure left in the Eternal Wax Museum that has not entered the quilling process, so we need to be cautious to avoid any unnecessary physical loss. It's still the scruples that arose from the very beginning. The enemies they need to face in this crusade against the Blackbeard pirates are definitely not the three Blackbeard brothers and sisters. The number of enemies hiding in the dark and ready to move is unknown. Although the Revolutionary Army Dragon promised to stop the most powerful Sakaski, there are still various unpredictable emergencies. He needs to keep an extra hand. Hearing Mr. 3's natural sarcasm, Blackbeard Kina was silent for a while, then raised her head and laughed. "Thief, ha ha ha. Mr. 3, I really admire you more and more." After laughing, endless killing intent burst out from the cold eyes. "That's why I want to trample you under my feet even more." Blackbeard Kina took a step forward, and just when she was about to take the initiative to attack Mr. 3, a white glove flew up behind her without a sound, pressing gently on her back. Successful. Buggy, who was standing on the ruins, smiled, and the split palm suddenly exerted force, exerting the effect of the awakened fragmented fruit to the extreme. Click click. A criss-cross grid of white light emerged from Blackbeard Kina's body, and as Buggy continued to output, the white light became more dazzling. As a result, Blackbeard Kina's body was cut apart bit by bit, and there was an obvious dislocation between flesh and blood. Even though her body was about to be torn apart, Kina the Blackbeard's beautiful face was still indifferent, and she didn't even turn her head. Buggy. Don't be so anxious, after I finish solving Mr. 3, you will be next. The powerful domineering raged wildly with the cold words, and the dark red lightning burst out, forcibly restraining the split body of Blackbeard Kina, and recovered in the blink of an eye. In the world of top powerhouses, domineering is the most important criterion for weighing combat power. Hey! Buggy, who thought he had succeeded in the sneak attack, instantly froze the smile on the clown's face. From the coercion of Blackbeard Kina, he felt an extremely obvious killing intent. His eyes popped out of their sockets in fright, and he silently withdrew his palm. He has deeply experienced the strength of the opponent. If he really wants to fight, he will die, and he will definitely die. After Mr. 3 returned, it hadn't been long before this coward who was greedy for life and afraid of death showed his true colors. Fortunately, Buggy is located under the torn-apart skull building, and the location is quite hidden, so that the younger brothers on Candleland will not see this hopeless appearance. Blackbeard Kina directly ignored it, even ignoring the retracted palm. It's not that she doesn't want to follow Mr. 3's example and turn around to attack Buggy, it's just that she has missed the opportunity, and Buggy's fruit ability is also very difficult to deal with, and she can achieve an instant kill. She focused more on Mr. 3 in front of her. The same dense dark red arcs flowed along the ground, setting off a terrifying domineering coercion. She also used her knowledge to kill. The two realms collided, obliterated, and finally dissipated into nothingness. So far, the two people's knowledge of predicting the future have been blocked by the other party, and then it will be a confrontation of incomparably pure physical skills and domineering. It's time to put an end to this boring battle. Let's fight to our heart's content, Mr. 3. Blackbeard Kina opened her arms, and the armed domineering and overlord-like domineering entwined on the steel claws. Her whole person's aura was as terrifying as a ghost. You can't wish for it, only the winner can get out of this beehive island. The dark wax liquid surged and turned into a heavy and ferocious mace that Mr. 3 held in his hand. The opponent this time is a strong man who can stand shoulder to shoulder with the red-haired Shanks. He didn't dare to make a big deal, so he directly used the rewards of Crocodile's side missions, and added more indestructible iron sand to the candle ability. Dark red thunder and lightning roared, and golden particles spewed out. The mace and steel claws bombarded together like a comet colliding, tearing apart the sky and overturning the earth. The entire space was trembling, and there was a huge roar. With the peak duel between Mr. 3 and Blackbeard Kina, the major battlefields on Candleland also began to play the finale. All the strong have nothing to hold back, they squeeze their own strength and potential to the limit, vowing to crush the opponent completely. The fluctuating fierce battles came out one after another, and the 5 major battlefields that should have been clearly divided into regions are inevitably gradually approaching. In the end, it finally became a mess and gathered into an extremely chaotic super battlefield. Of course, the Emperor-level combat power that was enough to destroy the balance of both sides did not participate in it, but chose a more remote battlefield with a tacit understanding. The light of the emerald knife tore through the sky, and the fit giant struck out with a heavy fist. Here, it is a death fight between the world's greatest swordsman and the successor of the ghost. If you look closely, you can see that the hot air balloon that should have been hovering in midair has disappeared. Affected by the shockwave of the tyrannical collision, the hot air balloon that Morgans and others were riding was overturned, lost its balance and fell to the ground. As an albatross fruit-capable user who can fly in the sky, Morgans interrupted the news shooting with a face full of helplessness, and gave priority to rescuing his subordinates who fell from the sky. After all, he still can't be absolutely ruthless. Fortunately, there are quite a few of his acquaintances among the many pirate forces watching in the waters around the Hive Island. After arranging the men who were still in shock, Morgans went to the battlefield alone with his wings flapping regardless of obstruction. He really wants to record the result of this final battle. After some delays back and forth, the battle between Mr. 3 and Blackbeard Kina on the Hive Island has reached a fever pitch. Boom. After another extremely overbearing collision, the two quickly separated, standing on the fragmented ruins and looking at each other. Sure enough, it's still too much to fight against an enemy of this level with the Overlord color burning burst. Mr. 3 was bathed in the red energy halo, his chest heaved slightly, and he was panting. After the brief confrontation just now, he has thoroughly figured out the true strength of Blackbeard Kina. Whether it's physique, skills, or the use of three-color arrogance, she is above herself. Although there are many bonuses such as the waxy fruit after awakening, the wings of freedom rewarded by the system, and the Overlord color burning, it still cannot make up the gap between the two. Especially in terms of physical strength and resilience, Blackbeard Kina has reached a level that Mr. 3 can't match. If you want to defeat such a perfect hexagonal warrior, you have to turn on the Overlord color and burn your life to fight. Without using the Eternal Wax Museum, I can only maintain the state of risking my life for 3 minutes at most. Mr. 3 raised his head and looked at the calm black-bearded Kina on the opposite side. After weighing several times, he couldn't help but let out a soft sigh in his heart. In such a short period of time, my words alone are not enough to defeat a strong person of this level. Blackbeard Kina seemed to see through Mr. 3's inner thoughts, stuck out her tongue and licked the blood-stained steel claw, and said aloud, "It seems that you already know that it is impossible to defeat me in this situation. I can give you enough time to use the powerful posture that killed Sister Tina just now." Her eyes burst out with an extremely powerful fighting spirit, showing the arrogance of invincible world. Mr. 3 remained silent, the other party did have such arrogance. "You seem to be hesitating. Then, let me make the decision for you." Suddenly, the corner of Blackbeard Kina's mouth curled up into a wild and confident smile. "Use the domineering way you are good at." Sizzle sizzle. Under Mr. 3's shocked gaze, Black-bearded Kina's sexy and proud body began to emit a relatively gentle dark red arc. Unlike the Overlord color that blooms and entangles with the Overlord color, the dark red arc condenses and jumps on the skin of Blackbeard Kina, and lasts for a long time. The already powerful and frightening momentum began to erupt like a volcanic eruption, and finally reached the peak. That's Overlord color burning. Hancock, who was sitting in the distance recovering his strength, widened his eyes. Ching Chung's beautiful eyes were full of disbelief. In such a short confrontation, Blackbeard Kina has actually mastered the initial stage of domineering burning. Don't be surprised. To put it bluntly, isn't your technique of improving physical fitness in all directions just to entangle the Overlord color that should have been covered on the outside, and bless it into the flesh and bones? This is not impossible for me. Blackbeard Kina clenched her fists tightly, then released them again, and the corner of her mouth smiled even wider. I don't know if he is satisfied with his body reaching an unprecedented peak, or with Mr. 3's damned expression. After being dazed for a few seconds, no matter how unbelievable it was, Mr. 3 still accepted the reality and sighed heavily. It's really a daunting talent. Although Overlord color burning is a branch reward of the system, its principle is actually a top-level physical skill similar to the sixth form of the Navy. As long as a strong person with Overlord color domineering chi can master it through practice. This can be confirmed from Hancock, and Hawkeye, who has seen it a few times, has also touched the threshold a little bit. However, the degree of danger is unimaginable. Except for Mr. 3 who mastered it in an instant, if anyone else wants to comprehend it, they need to take the risk of severe physical injury. Not to mention trying directly in a life and death duel like Blackbeard Kina. Super talent is of course an important factor, but her blind self-confidence to the point of arrogance is also the key to successfully comprehend the initial stage of the Overlord burning. If this is the case, then we can only bite the bullet. Mr. 3 stood on the broken battlefield, the cold wind brushed his cheeks, causing the cloak behind him to flutter slowly. Dark red arcs jumped on his body, highly condensed into a red circle of light, followed by golden particles rushing out. Blackbeard Kina watched the whole process intently, not wanting to miss any details. This is the real purpose of giving Mr. 3 enough time to activate the state of tyranny and life sacrifice. She wants to thoroughly learn this top-level skill that surpasses tyranny. However, a muffled voice revealing displeasure temporarily interrupted Mr. 3's process of starting the state of tyranny. "Mr. 3, if it doesn't work, just go away and stay here. This guy asked me to come." The cigar smoke ring fluttered, and Crocodile, who had rearranged his back hair at some point, walked slowly from behind. Mr. 3, who was highly concentrated on the black-bearded Kina, turned his head, and his pupils shrank immediately, shocked by the scene in front of him. I don't know when, behind him, there are a lot of bloody figures standing behind him. The goal of this bastard is the sweet fruit of the concubine, so let the concubine handle it. Snake earrings jingle. Hancock raised his hand to brush the long black hair that fell on the side of his face, and his green eyes revealed the unique arrogance of the pirate queen. Third brother, I think this guy is very upset. Even if you chop her into pieces, there is no problem, right? The silly weevil is covered with bloody wounds. With the strength of a young white beard, he walked firmly, completely ignoring his seriously injured body. Please, get rid of you rubbish. The heads of the 4 emperors, which are comparable to Kaido of beasts, naturally have to be harvested by me. Doflamingo walked with a step of disbelief. Even though his face was covered in blood and his feather coat was dirty and torn behind him, the rebellious Inuyasha was still flamboyant. He. I don't know how powerful a monster can be transformed into the corpse of a powerhouse of the 4 emperors. Moonlight Mariah had a bruised nose and a swollen face, and several jagged teeth had been knocked out. Reckless, he set his sights on Blackbeard Kina's powerful body. Third brother's heart is where my blade is pointing. Even if there is a huge difference in strength, I will eliminate the enemies in front of my eyes for third brother. Ayasha moved forward with firm eyes, and raised her hand to throw away the blood stained on the black long knife, revealing the sharp blade with a cold glow. Many seriously injured pirate brothers followed closely behind. They know how terrifying the enemy they need to face next is, and they also know that they will die at any time. But what came out of the ferocious eyes was a brave and fearless spirit. Behind everyone, on the farther Candle continent, Badgers, Pizarro, Shiryu of the Rain, Vanoka, Lafitte, Catherine Demai and other black group cadres were all lying in a pool of blood in disorder, completely losing their vital signs. Except for Barrett, who was still fighting Hawkeye, the members of the Blackbeard Pirates. Without exception, all were defeated. You bastards. Looking at the partners standing behind him unswervingly, even Mr. 3, who has never been happy, at this moment. The eyes were also uncontrollable, as if they had entered crocodile, becoming moist and hazy. It's so fucking reassuring. The dazzling golden light breaks through the sky. Mr. 3 no longer has any worries, and directly starts the Overlord color burning stage. With the violent roar of candle explosions, the final battle between the Crusaders and Blackbeard Kina begins now. The explosion roared, resounding through the sky. Under the violent impact, the entire Hive Island trembled continuously, and even the surrounding sea area set off waves of waves. With Mr. 3 as the main force and many Shichibukai-level powerhouses as the support, the decisive battle between the Cross Guild and the top powerhouse Blackbeard China is intensifying. The strange thing is that Buggy, who is the apparent president of the Crusaders and has awakened the ability to split the fruit, did not participate in it. It's not that he's really afraid of death, he doesn't even have the courage to face Blackbeard Kina. After all, this battle is about the life and death of all of them. If Mr. 3 and others lose miserably, no matter where they hide, they will die. So, where did the disappearing Buggy go? Time moved forward a little bit, just after Buggy tried to split Blackbeard China with his awakened fruit ability, but was counteracted by the other party with extreme domineering. He kept changing his position, looking for the best time to attack again, and at the same time ensuring that he temporarily disappeared from Blackbeard Kina's sight to save his life. Well, the latter is the main factor. Then, without paying attention, this guy fell into the cracks in the ground that had been torn apart by him, and came to the dark and damp underground space. A dark and deep passage appeared in front of his eyes, and there were cold and damp cells lined up left and right, in which countless prisoners with gloomy expressions were held. Buggy, who almost sprained his feet, stabilized his body, took a cursory look, and was suddenly surprised. He found out that apart from some well-known big pirates with a bounty of over 100 million, there were also quite a few well-known admirals and rare races who were locked up here. Obviously, this is the dungeon of the Blackbeard Pirates. You are small, no, you are the great and holy Lord Buggy? Buggy, the new 4 emperors who have emerged recently. In other words, it is the Cross Union that is attacking Hive Island? God Buggy, I have admired you for more than 10 years, and I am your most loyal fan. Please take me out.
The bright and dazzling light came in along with the broken earth, and fell on Buggy with his hands on his hips and a happy face. Even the big red robe became radiant.
In the eyes of these strong men imprisoned by Blackbeard, Buggy at this moment is like the most holy angel, who wants to bring salvation to this desperate world. You know, this is the headquarters of the 4 emperors Blackbeard Pirates. Combined with the loud noises that have been coming from just now, they quickly came to a conclusion. Hive Island has most likely been captured by the Cross Trade Union. At this time, even a guy with a little brain disorder knows that he must hug Buggy's super thigh tightly. Looking at these strong men who swore allegiance to him, Buggy blinked in bewilderment. At this moment, his heart went through a series of confusions, surprises, doubts, surprises, and finally turned into a smug laugh. Ahahaha. As expected, you were all imprisoned here by the evil Blackbeard. That's right. I came here to save you all by transforming Buggy in 2 ways. Buggy spread his hands, and the red robe on his body kept flying in the strong wind. Everyone who is willing to follow me and initiate the final judgment against the Blackbeard pirates, stand up. Although these imprisoned powerhouses have little effect on the Imperial battle, there is no doubt that they are all hostile to the Blackbeard pirates. If you can take this group of people for your own use, no matter how you think about it, you will not suffer. Thinking of this, Buggy, with a sinister face, tore his body apart and opened up the big red robe, making himself look even more terrifying. Whoosh whoosh. The awakened split fruit ability spreads in all directions with him as the center. In the blink of an eye, the seemingly indestructible cell railings cracked and scattered all over the floor. Ooh. Lord Buggy. What a terrifying power. From now on, you are the god in my heart. The pirates who had regained their freedom cheered loudly, amazed by Buggy's unpredictable method, and completely dispelled the redundant plans in their hearts. As for the Navy who insisted on justice, they looked at each other and stood silently in the cell full of apprehension. According to the standpoints of both sides, they and the domineering and mighty man in front of them are out-and-out enemies. If Buggy the Clown wants to target them, they will die without a place to bury them. Ha ha ha, if that's the case, then rush out with me, little ones. To their relief, Buggy didn't pay too much attention to them, or in other words, didn't take them seriously at all. Just when Buggy led a group of vicious pirates to rush out of the dungeon to support Mr. 3, a pretty figure appeared in front of him. Buggy, Katakuri brother, did you come to save me? The visitor was wearing white casual clothes, petite, with light brown wavy hair, and heavy halushi handcuffs on his white hands. Brown bangs fell down, covering a third eye looming on his forehead. It was Charlotte Bryn who was kidnapped from Chocolate Island by Fan Oka and Kuzan earlier. Obviously, Bryn knew that the Cross Union and the current Big Mom pirates were allies. What? Seeing the cute girl who suddenly appeared in front of him, Buggy was taken aback. Who are you? The number 35th daughter of the Big Mom pirates, Charlotte Bryn. Bryn raised her hand and gently brushed aside the bangs on her forehead, revealing her ferocious third eye. This is the most straightforward way to self-identify. Since receiving the affirmation and praise of her lover Sanji, brain supplement, she no longer feels inferior or disgusted because of her third eye. Oh, Charlotte Bryn. Buggy's eyes lit up, and he quickly realized it. Although he had never seen pudding with his own eyes, he had heard about the three-eyed clan sister from Katakuri. Did you just say that Katakuri asked me to save you? Buggy rolled his eyes, and an evil thought quietly appeared in his heart. Actually, you are only half right about this sentence. Hearing this, Bryn, who thought of some bad consequences, turned pale with fright, and backed away repeatedly. Could it be that brother Katakuri asked you to kill me in order to keep mother's secret? Buggy. New little brother. Bastard. Should the brain circuit be normal, Katakuri would never do such a thing no matter what he thinks. Back to his senses, Buggy's mouth full of teeth turned into jagged teeth, and he shouted sharply, I will definitely save you, but it's not what Katakuri meant, but it's my decision, the clown Buggy. Is it your decision? Why? Bryn Lu frowned, with deep guard in his eyes. She didn't think she had any interaction with the president of the Cross Union in front of her. Naturally, the power of your three-eyed clan is needed, Buggy answered calmly and without tact. But my heart was already full of joy. I didn't expect that I would pick up this kind of treasure by mistake. What luck. When following the adventures of the pirate group Roger, he had heard the legend of the three-eyed tribe, a magical race. If you want to get the legendary great secret treasure, you need to have 4 read historical texts and people who can decipher ancient texts. If the three-eyed clan really possesses this ability, as the #1 treasure hunt in the pirate world, Buggy will never let Charlotte Bryn go easily. Even if they are still allies with the Big Mom pirates now. After all, this is the cruel and ruthless world of pirates. Thinking of the scene where he was sitting on countless treasures and swaying wantonly, Buggy couldn't help but let out a hee smirk. This look, combined with the gloomy clown makeup, was extremely terrifying in Bryn's eyes. She turned around and was about to escape, but was grabbed by Buggy's split palm and tied up forcibly. Next. After making sure that Bryn would not run away, Buggy raised his head slightly, staring at the dungeon ceiling above his head, a splintered radiance gathered on his white gloves. Time was running out, and he didn't know what was going on, so he decided to use the simplest and rude way to bring many new recruits to the stage. Little ones, let Blackbeard have a good look at our strength. Buggy yelled violently, aiming at the ceiling above his head and shattering. Boom. White lines criss-crossed from the solid concrete slab, then completely split and collapsed, making a strange and terrifying noise. Before Buggy was surprised when his fruit ability had the explosive properties, the sky filled with stones mixed with soil and fell. Although this level of accident is unlikely to hurt the pirates and navy present, but at the moment of looking up, they still stared wide-eyed, revealing an expression of unbelievable horror. Because, along with the gravel and sand, there was also a rough and strong black figure. The messy black pirate captain's coat was in tatters, his black beard was disheveled, and was stained red by the blood constantly overflowing from the corner of his mouth. The turned white pupils have already lost focus, and if you look carefully, there are still a lot of shattered ice slags accompanying them. It is the Emperor of the Sea who traverses the New World, the owner of the Hive Island of Pirate Paradise. Marshal D. Teach. Under everyone's nervous gaze, Blackbeard Tiki, who was fatally wounded, fell heavily to the ground with a plop and completely lost consciousness. Could it be that, Mr. Buggy, you have already noticed the Blackbeard hiding on it? It's terrifying and domineering. Is this the legendary pirate who inherited the will of Pirate King Roger and can be compared with the red-haired Shanks? Let Blackbeard experience his strength, so that's what he meant. Looking at the Blackbeard lying on the ground unable to move, the newly recruited pirates trembled physically and mentally, amazed again and again. Facts have proved that no matter where Buggy goes, there is always no shortage of atmosphere groups around him who can discover his sparkling point. And at this time, as the person who is admired and praised by everyone. The shadow of the skull building. Kuzan put his hands in his pockets, his pupils under the black sunglasses slowly turned, glanced at Buggy who was laughing arrogantly standing on Tiki's corpse, and then looked at the black-bearded Kina who was at the end of his rope in the distance. In the end, Kuzan still didn't show up, but turned and walked deeper into the Hive Island. After lurking in the Blackbeard pirates for so long, he knew exactly what he wanted, so he stored it there. The coastal waters are riddled with Candle, Ice, Land. As expected of being crowned the world's #1 swordsman, Joracle Mihawk, this battle with you is the most hardy one other than Roger. The combined giant with a height of several hundred meters chooses to block out the sky, its thick legs break through the candle layer, and step on the seabed off the coast of the Hive Island. Opposite the giant, the man holding a crossed black knife looked extremely small. Hawkeye's face was calm, he bent his body to accumulate strength, and did not respond to Barrett's words. On the sharp black blade of Haidao Yefeng, the golden particles are dazzling like fireworks blooming, and with the black light, they become more intense and violent. The ultimate domineering color winding and armed color covering, converging into unimaginable energy ripples and spreading, as if to completely tear the space around the blade. Barrett in the core of the supergiant saw this, and his pupils became extremely dignified. He knew very well that what he was about to face next was the strongest blow from the world's #1 swordsman in the current era. If there is no accident, after this blow, the duel between the two of them will also come to an end.
And so, the battle madman Barrett laughed wildly, without the slightest thought of avoiding the edge temporarily, but controlled the supergiant and raised a right fist as huge as a mountain.
The black air gushed out, and the dark red lightning raged, turning into a flowing golden armor, completely covering the huge black right fist. Come on. Hawkeye Mihawk. An extremely excited and crazy look appeared on Barrett's face, and he took the initiative to attack. The black gold super heavy punch brought a frenzied airflow, and it fell with the force of a meteorite. Click click. Before the fist arrived, its impact arrived first, shaking the ground under Hawkeye's feet to pieces, sending wax shards and ice slag flying all over the sky. Hawkeye stood calmly on the ups and downs of the floating ice, the black cloak frantically swinging behind him. The sharp eagle-like pupils stared at the black gold giant fist that kept enlarging. After catching the best timing, the tiny Mihawk, holding knives in both hands, jumped up at a speed that was hard to catch with the naked eye, and rushed towards the huge right fist. Whoosh! There is no crazy and cool move name, and there is no earth-shattering terrifying momentum. But seeing the light of the emerald green knife flash past, it cut open the unstoppable black gold giant fist. Barrett's pupils shrank suddenly in the giant's body, and before he had time to react, the right fist and arm of the invincible hand that accompanied him in many years of fighting appeared a straight and penetrating cut mark. He was a little dazed, stayed where he was and shook his right arm slightly. Click click. Immediately, the cut marks on the arm burst into dazzling emerald light, which not only occupied all of Barrett's field of vision, but also made his brain go blank at this moment. The #1 swordsman in the world, a well-deserved title. Barrett's eyes dimmed, and he sighed, "It's me, I lost." Ling Lai's sword energy soared into the sky, and Hawkeye followed the black-gold right arm all the way up, splitting the indestructible supergiant in two. A huge roar resounded through the sea area, and countless crushed stones, candles, ice and other composite materials, together with the seriously injured Barrett, fell from the sky and sank into the sea. The successor of the ghost who shocked an era, died here. Hawkeye Mihawk landed smoothly, his breathing disordered. Even for him, trying to get rid of Douglas Barrett in such a short time seems to be quite difficult and full of danger. The battle over there looks like it doesn't need my support anymore. Hawkeye raised his head and looked in the direction of the Hive Island, shaking his arms, and slowly put Hey Dahlia behind him. At the same time, on the almost ruined Hive Island, there is a super deep pit with a diameter of more than 100 meters. At the bottom of the deep pit, deep and dark cracks in the earth extend in all directions like spider webs. And in the center of the crack, the black-bearded Kina was lying on the ground in a state of distress, covered in blood, as if she didn't have the arrogance and confidence she had at the beginning. Her limbs were stiff and she could no longer move. Around, Crocodile, Hancock and others from the Cross Union were all injured, their eyes were lax, almost to the point of desperation, and they could barely stand still to prevent themselves from falling down. The only movable eye pupil of Blackbeard Kina turned, swept across many strong men, and finally landed on Mr. 3, who was supported by the short-haired girl in black. At this time, Mr. 3's skirt was broken, and the 3 bloody paw prints on his chest looked quite terrifying. The corners of his mouth still overflowed with blood bubbles from time to time, lying limply on Ayasha's soft shoulders. "Mr. 3, you have won this battle." Kina with the black beard stared blankly into Mr. 3's eyes, trying to find the answer she wanted from this sinister, strange but domineering man. "You. Will it be the one that the guy mentioned, the person guided by fate?" Subconsciously, in the depths of Kina with the black beard, a terrifying man with stripy hair emerged. It was he who gave them the Devil Fruit illustrated book, and it was he who gave them the special physique of the Trinity, through means. After Blackbeard Tina obtained the dark fruit, this special physique was strengthened to the point of perfection. The 3 brothers and sisters who hide their secrets thus start the road to dominance at sea, attacking the city of advancement, wreaking havoc on the top of the war, and designing shocking fruits. Growing in secret, waiting for the battle of destiny, that the man mentioned was enough to change the whole world. For this reason, they did not hesitate to join forces with the Navy and Trafalgaro to occupy the Beehive Island, a paradise of pirates. The reason is simple, because that man was the previous owner of Hive Island. The well-deserved overlord of the sea in the last era, Lox D. Gebek. A person guided by fate? Mr. 3 rubbed Ayasha's shoulder, frowning slightly. If this so-called fate refers to something like the protagonist, then he, who has a system in the overall view of the original book, is definitely the person who fits this statement the most. Even the protagonist Luffy is hard to match. But what does this have to do with him, Galdino? His dream is only to become stronger, to become the most free, reckless existence in this sea. Maybe our Captain Buggy is more suitable for this title. Mr. 3 smiled mysteriously, and did not answer Blackbeard Kina's question directly. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Buggy since just now, so I'm not really scared enough to run to a corner to hide, right? Mr. 3, who didn't know what happened below the dungeon, was puzzled, but soon relieved. Forget it, that guy can't die anyway. Buggy the Clown. Huh. Thinking of the domineering and weak man who was afraid of death, after thinking about it for a while, Kina with the black beard looked up at the sky and let out a sigh. Maybe. Before the Battle of Beehive Island, she always felt that the 3 brothers and sisters were the people of destiny in Locke's mouth. After feeling Mr. 3's indescribably strange means and personality charm, she felt that Mr. 3 was the most suitable candidate. And such a man would willingly stay under Buggy the Clown and regard him as a leader. Blackbeard Kina really couldn't figure out the reason, and she, who had already been reduced to a loser, didn't bother to think about such a headache. Let's do it. Whether it's strategy or strength, I have lost this battle convincingly. It is the victory of your Cross Union. It's just a pity that no one can get out of here alive, because the Hive Island. Speaking of this, a mysterious smile appeared on the corner of Blackbeard Kina's mouth. Destruction is coming. Hearing this heavy news, the strong members of the Cross Guild finally relaxed their hearts, and it was raised in their throats in an instant. Is Hive Island about to be destroyed? It's just the bluff of a dying man. Even though his appearance is different, this guy is always that sinister and cunning black beard. Crocodile, with a calm mind, took the lead in standing up to stabilize the morale of the army. Those who can stay here are shrewd people. After careful consideration, they nodded slightly, agreeing with Crocodile's statement. The Hive Island has an excellent geographical location in the New World, and it may hide a secret that Blackbeard Kina would not want to be discovered even if she died. No matter what, let's kill this guy quickly, I can't wait to get her body. Moonlight Mariah took a step forward, and the depths of his narrowed eyes were full of strong desire. Just when he held the knife in both hands, he couldn't wait, and wanted to dissect and transform the Emperor-level powerhouse Blackbeard Kina just like that. Whoosh! The gray wax liquid with extremely strong burning properties flew out from behind, tightly wrapping the black-bearded Kina lying on the ground. Wait. If this powerful body... Realizing a certain possibility, Moria immediately screamed and wanted to rush over to stop it. However, the invisible tenacious silk thread tightly bound his huge body, making him unable to move forward even half a step. Ha. Moria, I advise you to give up this boring idea quickly. Doflamingo, who was still bleeding from his chest, walked to the side of Moria who was gnashing his teeth. One's own strength is the truest law of this cruel world. A corpse that can't even use domineering will have no effect on us now. As if agreeing with Doflamingo's statement, Mr. 3 no longer hesitated, raised his weak arm and waved it lightly. The high-temperature scorching candle burned violently, completely engulfing Blackbeard Kina and turning it into a sea of flames, obliterating the last bit of Mariah's thoughts. At the last second of death, Blackbeard Kina turned her head sideways with all her strength, staring at Mr. 3 with her deep pupils. The corners of the mouth were raised slightly, revealing a charming smile like a black rose. As a self-respecting, arrogant and majestic Emperor-level powerhouse, she is thanking Mr. 3 for his ruthless killing, so that she will not be reduced to a puppet dominated by others after death. The grateful Blackbeard Kina lifted the instinctive defenses of her mighty body, and greeted death with joy. The beautiful smile reflected by the blazing fire has become the last trace of this superpower full of unlimited ambitions in the world. So far, the 4 emperors and Blackbeard pirates are all wiped out. Mr. 3 stared blankly at the black-bearded Kina in the sea of flames, with many thoughts in his heart. Just at this time, Buggy, who led a group of new boys and Charlotte Brinet, appeared from the ruins of the completely collapsed skull building, bringing the news of the fall of Blackbeard Teach. Knowing that Buggy killed Tiki in an instant, Crocodile and others, who knew the roots of this guy, changed their expressions slightly, feeling outrageous. But when they thought about the terrifying scene of Buggy Fruit awakening and floating in a torn-apart world, they felt that this kind of thing was quite reasonable. Mr. 3 is still lying on Ayasha's body, squinting his eyes slightly, feeling the cheerful atmosphere around him. After a difficult victory, even the sea breeze blowing in front of you feels very comfortable. Countless emotions emerged, and finally turned into an inspiring whisper. The crusade against the Blackbeard pirates was a complete success. Everyone, we have won this war. Hearing this, the audience burst into deafening cheers immediately. Oh. The waters off the Hive Island. The many forces that witnessed this wonderful great war of the 4 emperors with their own eyes, after a brief exclamation, turned their bows and started to leave this place. The news of the complete demise of the Blackbeard pirates will spread throughout the world with the departure of this group of spectators. Enter the leading red-haired pirates. Shanks, the battle is over, we should go back. Co-Captain Beckman took down the cigarette butt he was smoking, and said to Shanks who was standing on the bow. As if he didn't hear his words, Shanks stared intently at Buggy's direction on the Beehive Island. Buggy, and Mr. 3, I didn't expect you to actually do this kind of thing. After a few seconds of silence, under the watchful eyes of the crew, Shanks finally jumped off the bow and waved his one arm. The helmsman understood instantly, and steered the pirate ship away from here. Meanwhile, another humble pirate ship. President, the Cross Union won, they really won. A member of the World Economic News newspaper was full of excitement, and suggested to the president next to him, Morgans, let's go over and interview the winner now, this is a super big headline. His suggestion was so meaningful that Morgans rewarded him with a big backhand. Bastard. You want me to die quickly so that I can take over my position, right? The member who made the sound was beaten a little confused. President, I don't quite understand what you mean. Why do you think these pirates around are slipping so fast? Why? Seeing his subordinates being so stupid, Morgan's eyes darkened. Thinking that this was the eldest son of his second uncle's cousin, he forcibly suppressed his anger and explained helplessly. The Crusaders have just defeated the Blackbeard pirates, their vitality has been severely damaged, and their nerves are in a state of high vigilance. Even a slight disturbance can arouse their hostility. Staying in the surrounding waters at this time is an offense, and you still want to land on the Hive Island to get close to them? The interview can be conducted at any time. If you want to die, don't drag Lao Su. The dilapidated Hive Island. The surviving pirates cheered loudly, and raised Buggy, who solved Blackbeard Tiki alone, and kept throwing, catching, and throwing in midair. The cheerful and lively atmosphere formed a sharp contrast with the devastated battlefield around. The pirate boys originally wanted to bring the vice captain who had an explosive performance in the audience, but Mr. 3 firmly refused on the grounds that he was seriously injured and unable to move. Being touched by a group of old men, how can it be more comfortable to stay on the soft and comfortable shoulders of a little fangirl? What's more, he still needs to be on guard against the remnants of the Blackbeards who may be hiding in the Hive Island, as well as those coveting forces in the outer waters. I didn't expect these ambitious guys to be so afraid of death, turning around and withdrawing without the slightest hesitation. After catching the fast evacuating pirate ships in the outer sea area, Mr. 3 dispelled the tension of high alert, and let out a regretful sigh in his heart. It seems that this top-level battle really frightened them all, a group of cowardly people. Fortunately, I am still looking forward to their landing on the island. Seeing that the routine of pretending to be sick and fighting back is difficult to achieve, he quietly took back the Eternal Wax Museum, which was always ready to activate the effect. Third brother, the guys who may become our second enemy have already left. Ayasha suddenly asked in a low voice. The red hair hangs down, covering the charming side face. Hearing this, Mr. 3 doubted. Is your fruit ability already able to cover such a long distance? Although her superb sword skills combined with the malicious fruit ability give Ayasha a strong combat power, her two-color domineering is not outstanding. Especially domineering, in battle, she still uses malicious perception to capture the opponent's movement trajectory and attack intention. This is her shortcoming. Of course, if you can perfectly combine the fruit ability with the arrogance of knowledge and arrogance, and form a heart network, like the Thunderfruit's Enel, this short board will become an absolute advantage. Thinking of this, Mr. 3 feels that after the Blackbeard incident has completely subsided, it is very necessary to give a dominant lecture to the little fans. This is one of the rewards for the main quest for Emperor's battle for hegemony, and it's only natural to keep good things for your own people. No, I'm very ashamed, third brother, my fruit ability is far from reaching that level. Ayasha's cheeks turned red immediately, and she lowered her head in shame. Then how do you know that the people from the outer sea have all left? Mr. 3 was a little surprised. Because, for a moment, third brother, your tense nerves are all relaxed. Ayasha replied truthfully. After all, the current Mr. 3 is lying on her shoulders through the thin clothes. She could clearly feel the strong heartbeat of the third brother. As a little fangirl, she was very excited and even a little flustered. You guy. Mr. 3 shook his head helplessly. After a few seconds of silence, Ayasha held her blood-stained white hand and asked courageously, by the way, third brother, you promised me earlier that you would give me your limited edition wax figure after the war? Let's talk about it after Kale Bali, Mr. 3 replied subconsciously. But as soon as he said the words, he realized something was wrong. Wait, didn't I reject you on the spot? Hey. Ayasha, who has always been cautious, showed a bright and playful smile very rarely. Then let's say it like this, third brother, you can't break your promise. Boom. Mr. 3 raised his arm, tightened his fingers to accumulate strength, and hit Ayasha's smooth forehead with a blow of the brain. How dare you set me up, you guys have become quite fat. Having said that, he did not refuse as decisively as before, but acquiesced to Ayasha's reward request. In fact, as a little man, who has brought out the insidious and cunning to the extreme, why can't he not see Ayasha's clumsy little thinking? Without him, it's just to satisfy the faithful little follower. A big bump appeared on Ayasha's forehead soon, but despite this, the satisfied little girl still stood there and giggled. Soon, the appearance of a strong figure interrupted the carnival of the little pirates. Congratulations, Buggy, you guys won this unexpected battle. Kuzan, wearing a black windbreaker, walked slowly from the depths of the Hive Island, carrying a black bag in his hand. A cold airflow followed, causing the surrounding temperature to drop several notches. The deterrent power of the former admiral of the Navy headquarters rushed to the face, and many strong members of the Cross Union were shocked, and they were ready to face the battle at any time. Their current state is very bad. If Kuzan is really loyal to the Blackbeard pirates, or wants to do something out of undercover Navy, it will definitely be a fatal blow to them. Green Pheasant. The first time he saw Kuzan, Buggy felt a retreat in his heart, and quietly touched the back of the crowd. After barely opening the distance, his eyes narrowed, revealing a ferocious and brutal clown expression. Blackbeard has been completely defeated by us, and there is no chance of a comeback. Kuzan, no matter what your purpose is, I advise you, it's best to leave Hive Island immediately and don't become our enemy. Although Mr. 3 clearly mentioned that Kuzan was not their enemy in this operation in the pre-war meeting of the Crusade against Blackbeard, the current situation of the Crusaders is quite bad, and the group will be wiped out if they are not careful. What's more, the man in front of him has the sensitive identity of a former admiral of the Navy headquarters. From the perspective of the original character of One Piece world, Buggy dare not joke about the fate of their entire pirate group, so he can only try to temporarily scare Kuzan away. The little pirates who saw Kuzan's frightened expression immediately turned their heads to see that Mr. Buggy had such an arrogant and domineering dismissive tone when facing the former admiral. Suddenly there were stars in his eyes, showing an expression of admiration. At the same time, they also gained confidence, took out the weapons at their waists on the spot, and shouted to provoke Kuzan from the air, with a very insolent arrogance. Buggy, who finally mustered up the courage to stabilize himself, was frightened, and winked wildly at the younger brothers who were getting more and more flamboyant. Lord Buggy, you are. The little brothers noticed Buggy's eyes, and after some brainstorming, they turned into a god-level understanding. Don't put Kuzan in your eyes at all, and want to hand it over to us who are super trustworthy. Woo. I didn't expect you to be seriously injured, and you still don't pay attention to the former admiral, and we were frightened by Kuzan just now. As your subordinates, we are really ashamed. As they spoke, the little pirate's eyes were fixed, and a fierce fighting spirit broke out. In order to live up to Master Buggy's expectations and trust, come on Kuzan, let us be your opponents. Huh. Huh. This kind of reckless provocative behavior directly scared Buggy, who was standing at the back of the line, out of his emoji. He stretched out his arm tremblingly to stop him, but Crocodile, Hancock and other captains stepped forward to block him. Even you. Buggy was stunned, his heart burst into tears, and he began to think about his last words. Fortunately, in the face of such battles and provocations, Kuzan just shook his hands and threw the burden on the ground, spreading his hands without any intention of fighting. This is really a headache. I didn't come to you to fight. Hearing this, he was afraid that the little brothers would do something outrageous. Buggy raised his voice and said first, if that's the case, let me get out of here quickly. This posture of speaking the most sincere words with the most arrogant posture really made the Mr. 3 behind laugh. However, what Kuzan said next shocked even a traveler who had read the original book. As you can see Buggy, after the destruction of the Blackbeard pirates, I have nowhere to live. Kuzan took off his black sunglasses, stared at Buggy seriously, and said in a deep voice, so, can I join your team? As soon as these words came out, the younger brothers who were still shouting crazily just now were stunned for a moment, holding the weapons in their hands and froze in place stupidly. No, you heard me right. Admiral-level combat power of the Navy headquarters, Aokiji Kuzan, who fought the current Admiral Akainu for 10 days and 10 nights. To actually ask to join their cross-union and stay under Buggy's command? Compared to the shock of the younger brothers, Buggy was full of anxiety and said impatiently, I've said it all, if you don't want to fight with us, leave quickly, I don't care if you join or not. Now he only wanted to invite Kuzan away, a super trouble that threatened his own life, and he didn't listen carefully to what the other party said. Lord Buggy, you actually refused. Seeing Lord Buggy's resolute refusal, the shock on the faces of the little pirates grew even stronger. Only now did they realize very deeply and clearly what level of pirate group they joined. Even the combat power of the admiral level is not in the eyes. Hey, this is a top combat power, Buggy, have you figured it out? Crocodile next to him couldn't stand it any longer. He stood up and reminded him earnestly, knowing Baji's details. Buggy pursed his lips tightly, and his eyes, which were fierce just a second ago, stared extremely round, and then blinked cutely. After thinking carefully and carefully recalling Kuzan's words just now, Buggy, who finally came to his senses, collapsed on the spot, remorseful and sad, wishing to tear his stinky mouth apart. Although he is a user with the ability to tear apart, the tearing of his mouth has no effect at all. Seeing that the atmosphere suddenly became awkward, Mr. 3, who was lying on Ayasha's shoulder, slowly stood up straight and came in front of everyone. Buggy, I know you are worried that Kuzan joined us for some purpose. Don't worry about that. I can vouch for his character. The steps came to his feet with a swoosh. Buggy was naturally very happy, and walked down along. Ahem, since the deputy captain has said so, then I have nothing to worry about. Speaking of this, Buggy walked in 3 steps, and came to Kuzan in a flash, and quickly stretched out his palm. Then, you are welcome to join, Kuzan. At the same time, Buggy secretly made up his mind that when there are fewer people in the meeting, he must explain clearly to Kuzan and resolve this misunderstanding. The opponent is a real general-level fighter, and he deserves to be treated so seriously. It's my honor. Kuzan naturally didn't care about such trivial matters, and reached out to hold Buggy together. So far, under such unexpected circumstances, the former Navy Admiral Kuzan has successfully joined the Cross Union. Mr. 3 looked at Kuzan, who was surrounded by cheering younger brothers, and passively hooked his shoulders with Buggy. A gleam flashed in the depths of his eyes. Things happen for a reason, and with Kuzan's character, he will never decide to join such a big event casually. Perhaps considering the large number of people now, he did not specifically explain the reason for joining. But Mr. 3 is not in a hurry. After all, for no reason, he prostitutes a general-level combat power for nothing. Such good things don't happen every day. As for Kuzan's purpose, just ask him later. Of course, just to be on the safe side, before he stood up, he made eye contact with Ayasha and got an affirmative answer. The bug ability of malicious fruit is fully reflected at this time. In a state where the other party has not fully grasped the effect of the malicious fruit, Ayasha can even detect and judge the weak maliciousness on the general-level powerhouse. By the way, Brother Kuzan, what is this package you brought? Buggy found the black bag at Kuzan's feet. It's a meeting ceremony to join you. Kuzan smiled mysteriously, turned around and opened the bag, and took out a stack of parchment that was sealed in ice. This is a rubbing copy of one of the 4 historical texts collected by the Blackbeard pirates. It should be the historical text located in Elbaf, the Kingdom of Giants. Historical text. Great secret treasure. Not long ago, Buggy, who was still thinking about the big secret treasure, heard it. His eyes burst out with scorching light, and he snatched the rubbing from Kuzan's hand. That look of finding a treasure is the same as when he snatched Captain John's treasure bracelet from Luffy 2 years ago in Advance City. It seems that you are very satisfied. With a smile on his face, Kuzan turned around and glanced at the admirals and special races who were hiding behind the ruins in the distance and were imprisoned by Blackbeard. In exchange, can I trouble you not to embarrass those navies in the dungeon? After all, some of them were once my subordinates. This kind of insignificant matter is simply not worth mentioning to Buggy, whose thoughts drifted to Ralph Drew. No problem at all. Kuzan, who received an affirmative answer, breathed a sigh of relief. Even though he has been a pirate for a long time, his heart has not wavered in the slightest. If everything has been resolved, let's clean up first and go back to Kale Bali first. Recalling the warning that Blackbeard Kina had given before, for some reason, Mr. 3 always had an inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. After the fall of the Blackbeard pirates, the Hive Island was already the territory of the Cross Guild. I believe that during their departure, there will be no more ignorant people landing on the island to occupy it. I said, Mr. 3, you're not so timid, you were really taken off by Blackbeard's silly words, right? Doflamingo was the first to stand up. Expressing opposition is one thing, the most important thing is that he doesn't want to let go of this opportunity to mock Mr. 3. Just as Mr. 3 was about to refute, a red light suddenly flashed in his eyes. The body, aware of some kind of terrible crisis, actively released the domineering arrogance of predicting the future. Immediately after, Hawkeye, Kuzan, Hancock and others also sensed a dangerous aura that could make the hair on their heads stand on their backs. This feeling of heart palpitations, from above. Mr. 3 looked up, his pupils suddenly shrank. Unknowingly, a supergiant comparable to an island quietly appeared, hovering over the Hive Island. Buzz. The dazzling white light that was enough to cover the entire Hive Island shone, and amidst the deafening roar, 16 super beams carrying destructive energy erupted and shot down. The holy land of Mary Joya, the deepest part of Pangu City, the garden among the flowers. I am with deep and dark eyes sat on the ground, holding a special paintbrush with his slender fingers, understated, and crossed the position of the Hive Island on the world map in front of him. After finishing this simple and pure action, I slowly stood up, turned and left. The crossed map was left in place, and along with it, there was a bounty list that was broken into several pieces. The round red nose is very iconic, and the scary clown makeup directly exposes the identity of the person on the wanted list. It's Buggy the Crusader the Clown. Outside, in the dark corridor leading to the Void Throne, the 5 old stars who had just met Lord Im walked side by side and returned to Pengu City. Although Sakaski's actions were unexpectedly hindered and he couldn't wipe out the 2 pirate groups in the first place, is it really okay to use that kind of power on Hive Island? After hesitating for a long time, one of the 5 old stars finally spoke and whispered his concerns. The old 4 emperors like Kaido and Big Mom all have their own fixed territories and kingdoms. The reason why they did not use power enough to destroy the country before is not only the high cost, but also an important reason. That is the world government, or to be precise, I am the king of the world, who wants to maintain the delicate balance of sea power and maximize its own interests. After all, if there are no pirates who do all kinds of evil, there will be no need for the existence of the Navy headquarters that implements justice, at least it will not be able to reach its current scale. And the world government that serves the Tianlong people naturally has very little to get. Obviously, that lord has already made a judgment that it is no longer necessary to maintain balance. Another 5 old stars replied in a deep voice. History is always strikingly similar. With the appearance of Nika Fruit and the fall of Blackbeard, today's era may reappear the 100 years that disappeared. Another Wu Laoxing's eyes flickered, and his voice was cold and firm. We just need to trust Lord Im's decision and carry out her will to the end. As soon as these words came out, the other 5 old stars fell into silence for a while, and did not refute any more. At the same time, New World Beehive Island. Looking at the giant energy beam that could cover and destroy the entire island, the members of the Cross Guild who were celebrating Kuzan's joining just a second ago were stunned on the spot, their minds went blank. The irresistible crisis came too suddenly, almost in an instant, bringing endless despair. Why? How could this be? Just kidding. How could there be such a power in this world? Not to mention the little pirates who had been frightened and paralyzed to the ground long ago. Even the captain-level Shichibukai powerhouses like old Samoria were all breathing stagnantly, their scalps tingling, and they stood there at a loss. They had fought against Blackbeard just now, and their physical strength had long since bottomed out. How could they block such a shocking and terrifying attack? Damn it. Those bastards of Wu Laoxing would actually agree to let this kind of thing appear? Doflamingo was sweating profusely, and the red sunglasses reflected the brilliance of the energy beam. Indistinctly, the outline of a giant flying object can be seen through the lens. As the only existence present who knew some of the secrets of the Tinlongren, he probably knew what a terrifying superweapon hovering in the sky was. It is precisely because of this that the fear in my heart is even more intense. Under the sluggish eyes of the people who were almost desperate, the 16 energy beams completed the final charge. The violent energy mercilessly poured down towards the ruined Hive Island. Almost at the same time, behind Mr. 3, the Phantom of the Wax Museum built purely by candle creation dissipated little by little and became invisible. The candles were flickering, and the last remaining wax figure was successfully used. Without the slightest hesitation, Mr. 3, whose physical condition had reached its peak again, rushed out quickly. The dark red arc jumped and condensed into a red energy halo, and then the golden particles overflowed, bursting out with an unparalleled powerful momentum. The situation was critical, so he directly started the strongest fighting stance at present. Waxing, Candle Demon Sky. Mr. 3 yelled violently, raised his arms that were continuously gushing gray wax, and pressed them hard against the ground under his feet. Buzz. The whole island began to tremble violently. Mr. 3 exerted the awakened wax fruit's ability to the extreme. With his hands as the center, the fragmented land was quickly assimilated into liquid candles. The diffusion speed of the wax with the effect of iron sand is extremely exaggerated. In the blink of an eye, the vast surface of the honeycomb island is occupied by pure gray and white tones, turning into a sea of wax that is constantly overflowing. The ocean of candles kept surging, and rising currents with a diameter of more than meters soared into the sky, like Optimus Prime, propping up an indestructible candle barrier over the Hive Island. The next second after the formation of the candle sky, the energy beam of the super sky weapon happened to fall. Boom boom boom. A devastating shock wave erupted, and the roar resounded through the sky, as if it was about to violently tear the eardrums of everyone under the candle barrier. Just the moment of contact with this energy, Mr. 3, who was holding up the barrier alone, let out a wow and spit out a mouthful of blood uncontrollably. The destructive power contained in this mysterious super weapon far exceeded his expectations. As expected of a thing that can completely wipe the entire Caucasia kingdom from the map, the power held by the world government is really desperate. Mr. 3 gritted his teeth and resisted, increasing the output power of the fruit ability. The entire Hive Island shrank little by little at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into wax liquid to bless the sky. The energy storage time of the mysterious weapon is actually not fast, and Mr. 3, who has turned on the burning state, has enough time to evacuate and evade. But there are other partners of the Cross Union on this island, obviously, he can't put them to death. Mr. 3, third brother. After a brief downtime, Buggy, Shahan Cook and others finally came back to their senses, ran over anxiously, and surrounded Mr. 3 in the middle. The power of this thing is too strong, I can't hold it for too long. Mr. 3 ignored the blood spilling from the corner of his mouth, and while desperately maintaining the candle sky, he gritted his teeth and said, "Take advantage of this time, get out of here quickly." 3. What nonsense are you talking about? We finally won this war, and if we want to leave, we must all go together. Buggy changed from his previous greed for life and fear of death, his eyes were firm, and he didn't have any thoughts of turning around and running for his life.
Although at this moment, the body hidden in the big red robe was already trembling.
The same goes for the other captains. Even Moria and Hawkeye, who joined at the end and didn't have much ties to the Cross Union, stood silently. As Chi Wuhai, who had lived the most shrewd and nourished life, they knew very well that in this situation, the most taboo thing was to procrastinate, and any hesitation would be disrespectful to those who stayed behind. If it were anyone else, they would definitely turn around and leave without hesitation, but Mr. 3 is different. The Cross Guild may still be able to function without the President Buggy, but without Mr. 3, it will definitely fall apart and cease to exist. During the stalemate, endless cold air bloomed, rising into the sky along the upward current, freezing the candle sky, and transforming it into an ice age. Kuzan came to Mr. 3 with his hands in his pockets. Feeling how terrifying the impact of the energy above was, he looked dignified, slowly took off the sunglasses on the bridge of his nose, sighed softly and let out a cold breath. "Let me come." There was an extreme cold air around Kuzan, and broken ice chips kept falling from his body. Looking at all the members of the Cross Guild, except for Mr. 3, who used some incredible means to restore his combat power, his physical strength was the best in the audience. Moreover, only he, who is capable of freezing fruits, has the strength to succeed Mr. 3 in resisting the attack of super weapons. Mr. 3 pressed his hands on the ground and raised his head to look at Kuzan. The moment he met those resolute and fearless eyes, he immediately understood Kuzan's determination. His identity is too sensitive. Not only is he a former admiral of the Navy headquarters, but he also served in the Blackbeard Pirates. If you don't do something, there will be more or less estrangement in the eyes of the cadres of the Cross Union. Even though, this matter is extremely dangerous. If that's the case, then please. In order to live up to Kuzan's determination and for his partners to successfully evacuate, Mr. 3 made a decisive decision without talking too much nonsense about mother-in-law and mother-in-law. Buggy has agreed to your joining, so you must come back alive. After a solemn confession, Mr. 3 immediately released the domineering state and withdrew the ability to assimilate the fruit of the earth. Losing the share of candle sky, all the energy erupted by the beam of light fell on Kuzan. His tall and straight figure collapsed in an instant, and inevitably, the corners of his mouth also overflowed with blood because he couldn't bear the heavy pressure. The glaciers shattered, and crystal-clear ice slags fell from the sky, bringing a tragic scene. "Let's go." Mr. 3 took a deep breath, and the wax sprayed from his right arm, turning into a giant candle palm, holding all the members of the Crusaders and Bryn, together with the Navy and special races deep in the ruins.
Then his legs bent, bursting out at a speed that was hard to catch with the naked eye, and rushed towards the outer sea of Hive Island.
The pirate ship of the Crusaders was destroyed in the battle between Hawkeye and Barrett, and there is no ship across the sea. So Mr. 3, who came to the coast of Hive Island, used the fruit ability to temporarily create a candle boat. Based on his current mastery of wax fruit, it is not difficult to do this kind of thing. Whoa! The candle pirate ship generated out of thin air slammed into the turbulent sea, and after displacing enough seawater, it slowly floated up again. Wings of freedom grew out of Mr. 3's back, flew to the ship, and laid down the giant candle hand. The people crowded inside jumped off one after another, and stood on the deck of the Candle pirate ship, staring back at the superweapon hovering over the Hive Island with horror on their faces. Without giving them too much time to be shocked, Mr. 3 raised his hand and threw out the ash liquid with explosive properties, forming a temporary jet device at the tail of the Candle pirate ship. With an explosion, the flames of the Candle flames spurted out. Under the strong reaction force, the Candle pirate ship catapulted forward at an extremely fast speed, and rushed out of the sea off the Hive Island in the blink of an eye, far away from the attack range of the superweapon. From the start of Mr. 3's operation to the safe evacuation of everyone, the whole process took place in less than 10 seconds. However, this is already the limit that Kuzan can bear. After all, what he was fighting against was a terrifying energy that could wipe out an entire large island. Click, click, click. The ice barrier tens of meters thick was finally penetrated by the energy light beam, and a large amount of white steam emitted. Kuzan bled all over his body and turned into ice cubes and shattered to the ground. The 16 beams of light that lost their resistance immediately fell down and bombarded the Hive Island, bursting out terrifying energy that would destroy the world. Boom. The semicircular violent flame cloud swallowed up the Hive Island in an instant, and the roaring sound resounded through the sea. Whether it is the ruins of skulls, or building facilities, or mountains, forests, plains and beaches, all the materials on the Hive Island are wiped out in this instant, disappearing into nothingness. The shock waves that oscillated in all directions from this even set off waves several meters high in the surrounding sea area. The terrifying energy storm didn't last too long. About a minute later, as the super weapon hovering in the sky slowly disappeared into the depths of the thick clouds, the world became silent, leaving only the sound of running water. Deep pits appear, and seawater pours back. Everyone on the Candle pirate ship looked up, and saw that the Hive Island where they had fought bloody battles had been completely annihilated and disappeared. When the turbulent sea current gradually calmed down and the entire sea was empty, where was there any sign of an island? This is the ultimate weapon in the hands of the world government. Including Mr. 3, who has the overall view of the pirate world, all the strong members of the Cross Guild were horrified, shocked by this terrifying method of erasing an island in just a few breaths. No wonder the absolute status of the world government has not been shaken for hundreds of years. This kind of power is simply desperate. However, there were quite a few people present who also possessed the powerful power of destroying the island. Although they couldn't be destroyed in an instant like the mysterious weapon, they were not so frightened that they trembled. After all, weapons are just weapons after all, and they can only strike at fixed points. As far as the beam of energy just now is concerned, if they are at their peak state, it may not be realistic to be tough, but there are many ways to dodge and evade them. Mr. 3 stood at the bow of the boat, staring intently at the empty sea, full of knowledge and arrogance, wanting to detect the aura of Kuzan who had disappeared. Where's Kuzan? That guy won't just hang up. Buggy, who reacted from the shock, looked anxious, and directly used the torn fruit ability to float his upper body, flew to the sea and called Kuzan's name. The powerhouses of the entire ship were also staring at the sea with serious eyes, their breathing was tight, and their expressions were tense. Unconsciously, in order to cover their evacuation, Kuzan faced the energy of the island alone. Putting aside all suspicions and scruples, they owe him a great kindness just for this matter. However, no matter how loudly the little pirates and the marines shouted, the sparkling sea was still silent, without any response. It's a lie, Aokiji-sama won't really be like this. The sailors who had followed Kuzan knelt down on the ground. Even if they were iron-blooded men, they couldn't help but burst into tears when they thought of some kind of bad possibility. Don't worry, that man is far more than that. Suddenly, the tight corners of Mr. 3's mouth relaxed, and then rose slightly. Through the arrogance of predicting the future, he saw the future in a few seconds. Whoosh whoosh. Not long after Mr. 3's voice fell, the cold air bloomed, and the calm sea was immediately frozen, solidifying into a sheet of ice flow. In the center of the ice flow, the human-shaped ice sculpture rose slowly, and then cracked with a click. As the ice shards fell from the sky, Kuzan reappeared in everyone's field of vision wearing a windbreaker. A lazy and leisurely voice followed. It's really dangerous, I almost can't escape. Kuzan raised his hand and pushed the black sunglasses on the bridge of his nose to his forehead. Facing the afterglow of the setting sun swaying down from the sky, he waved to everyone on the Candle pirate ship. Hey, everyone from the Cross Guild, good afternoon. Looking at Kuzan, who should have returned safely, after a short silence, exciting cheers broke out on the pirate ship. So far, all members of the Cross Union have successfully survived the sudden and indiscriminate bombing. The Hive Island War that shocked the whole world has come to an end. A brig with a newspaper delivery seagull printed on it. Morgans, who left the waters near the Hive Island ahead of time and received support from the newspaper office, did not know about the subsequent shocking changes on the Hive Island. As a dedicated and conscientious newsman, at this moment he was staying in the cabin room, and his entire bird face was blushing due to overexcitement. Looking at the photos of the big battle that filled the entire table, including the 5 major battlefields, the 3 black beards, Mr. 3 who came back to life after death, and so on, Morgans couldn't help but gear up and start thinking about tomorrow's headlines. This kind of news that records the peak confrontation of the top 4 Emperor pirates will definitely bring the ultimate impact to the already turbulent world. President, according to the information just received, at the same time as the Battle of Beehive Island, it is said that the pirate Golden Lion and Pirate King Roger once fought against Artwall, and a top-level decisive battle broke out. A newspaper member hurried in, interrupting Morgan's sudden inspiration. Asshole. I don't know if I'm thinking of a title. It's none of my business to break the top battle. Is there a cross-union with the Blackbeard pirates? Morgans yelled at the members of the newspaper. Yes, it is Admiral Sakaski of the Navy headquarters, General Green Bull, and the Revolutionary Army headed by Monkey D. Long and Yandy Sabo. The members of the newspaper stood up to their president's saliva and said bravely. Who are the marshal of the headquarters and the Revolutionary Army? Morgan subconsciously wanted to continue yelling, but suddenly his eyeballs rolled and he regained his energy. Wait, what did you say? The members of the newspaper office swallowed their saliva, and after organizing the collected information, they slowly talked about this naval battle that also shocked the world. Unlike the Crusaders and the Blackbeard pirates, neither Sakaski nor the Dragon intend to fight desperately, and both sides have reservations in their battles. Even so, the Revolutionary Army is obviously at a disadvantage in the face of Sakaski, who has the most lethal fruit, and the second-in-command Yandy Sabo and the commanders of the 4th District Army have been traumatized to varying degrees. On the side of the Navy headquarters, the iron-headed General Greenbull was also pierced through the chest by Emperor Yan Sabo's fire fist, and it would be difficult to recover within 3 to 5 days. The strong men on both sides have their own injuries. This is the first official confrontation between the Revolutionary Army and the Navy headquarters, and it ended in an expected draw. What excited Morgans was the possible, ambiguous relationship between the Revolutionary Army and the Cross Trade Union.
All fools know that Sakaski must go to the Hive Island to harvest the 2 pirate groups of the 4 emperors, and judging from the results of the battle on the Hive Island, the one who has reached some kind of cooperation with the Revolutionary Army is very likely to be the winner cross union.
Buggy, Mr. 3, I really never thought that you would become more topical existences than the Straw Hat Boys. Morgan's eyes flashed brightly, and he laughed wildly. Ahahaha. What will happen to the world in the future? It's interesting, it's so interesting. It was already late at night when the candle pirate ship made by Mr. 3 arrived at the Crusaders' Union stronghold, Kale Bali. Rayleigh, Reju, Alvida and other younger brothers who received the news of the big victory in advance, waited on the coast early. As the candle pirate ship dissipated little by little and melted into a slender candle channel, the 2 groups of troops officially completed their confluence. In terms of practicality, Mr. 3's fruit ability after awakening is really unsolvable. Buggy, Mr. 3, and everyone, I already know the general outline of the battle from the little girl Reju, the liaison officer. Rayleigh, the oldest person in the audience, greeted the crowd who returned in triumph. With a strong smile on his slightly vicissitudes face, he raised his thumb and said, "Nice job. Uncle Rayleigh, you don't know how powerful I was at that time, the whole world was torn apart." With the affirmation of the former deputy captain, Buggy wiped his red nose, and the clown's face was full of arrogance and complacency. Ha ha ha. Fruit ability awakening, I really didn't expect you to take this step. Rayleigh laughed. Buggy immediately became upset, squeezed his face, and yelled, "What do you mean you didn't expect it? Could it be that you bastard actually didn't expect anything from me?" Hearing the conversation between the two, the little pirates around who had seen Buggy split the ground of the Hive Island didn't care at all. He simply thought that Raleigh, the king of the underworld, had a special relationship with President Buggy, and was just joking. Compared with Raleigh's not expecting, what they care more about is Lord Buggy's arrogant attitude even in the face of Pluto. This made the admiration in their hearts even deeper. Everyone walked and talked, and soon came to the main building in the center of Bali. Walking into the hall, looking at the familiar circus decoration style and fluttering small flags, including Crocodile and Hancock, who have always been arrogant and unruly, The original Shichibukai who have experienced the Battle of Beehive Island can't help but give birth to a touch of emotion and touch. Although they are very unwilling to admit it, and feel disgusted and irritated by it, it is undeniable that the moment they return here, the tense nerves all over their bodies are unconsciously relaxed, and the comfort written on their faces is even more difficult. Cover. Obviously, after various major events, today's cross-union has been able to give them enough sense of belonging. Blue blue blue. Just when the exhausted people were about to return to their residences and take a comfortable bath, the voice of the phone bug rang quietly. Wearing a pink battlesuit, Reiju, who was a temporary liaison, took out a white phone bug from the indescribable field. Thanks to the advantages of Mioman's figure and combat uniform, Reiju directly put several important encrypted phone bugs on her body to ensure that she can obtain and process intelligence information at the first time. And the white phone bug that called this time is a special line for the temporary ally Big Mom Pirates. President Buggy, third brother, this is Katakuri of the Big Mom Pirates, do you want to connect? Holding the phone bug in her hand, Reiju asked Buggy and Mr. 3 aloud. Although she is now Mr. 3's direct younger brother, in this kind of public occasion, it is natural to take care of the President Buggy's face. Katakuri. Mr. 3 doubted, turned his head and glanced at Charlotte Bryn who was still tied up and sulked with pursed lips, and nodded lightly, go ahead. Click. The white phone bug connected, and its protruding head changed into that of Kar wearing a gray and white scarf. Mr. 3 took the phone bug from Reiju. Katakuri, you really know how to pick your time. We just got back to Kale Bali when you called. On the Cake Island of all nations, Katakuri sat on the candy sofa with his legs crossed, his expression was still cold, and he said in a deep voice, it doesn't matter how this kind of thing is. It's you. I heard that the Blackbeard pirates were completely wiped out by you. From Mr. 3's strange behavior of asking Big Mom's status earlier, he guessed that the Cross Society will make a big move next. It's just that they never expected that they would launch this blitzkrieg that shocked the entire world in such a short period of time, defeating the alliance between Blackbeard and the legendary pirate Barrett, and winning a complete victory. In fact, Katakuri had the idea of going to the Hive Island as soon as he received the information that the Cross Union was attacking the Hive Island, but he had to stay in Wangguo due to the abnormal state of his aunt. Ha ha ha, Blackbeard and Barrett don't put much pressure on us. Mr. 3 smiled heartily and boasted. Smiles bloomed on the faces of the surrounding strong men. After all, to completely wipe out a group of 4 emperors with several emperor-level combat power, looking at the entire history of pirates, there are only a handful of pirate groups that can do this kind of thing. Even if he didn't rush to the battlefield, Katakuri could clearly imagine the intensity of the battle. After a few seconds of silence, he was concerned about his sister's safety and directly explained his purpose. I don't know if you have met my sister, Charlotte Bryn from the Three-Eyed Clan? Mr. 3, who had long guessed her intention, did not hide anything, and said truthfully. Fortunately, she was found by our President Buggy, and she is now here in Kale Bali. That's it, that's really great. Katakuri Zhang heaved a sigh of relief, and even his tone became lighter. However, we have taken a fancy to her ability, so we don't plan to return it for the time being. Mr. 3 changed the subject, revealing a touch of treachery. What? On the side of Cake Island, sitting around Katakuri, those arrogant ministers of all nations immediately became angry and shouted fiercely there. Even though they are well aware of how powerful the current Cross Union is, the return of their mother Charlotte Lingling gave them great confidence in their panic. No matter how strong your Cross Union is, you have to be afraid of your mother who is also at the level of the 4 emperors. Let Sister Bryn go back, right? There are even some ignorant idiots who proposed to Katakuri to forcefully take back Sister Bryn. Without even thinking about it, Katakuri raised his hand to stop these idiotic remarks and even the scolding around him. The restless atmosphere immediately quieted down. This kind of thing is irrelevant, it is enough to know that Bryn is safe and sound. He looked at the phone bug that had turned into Mr. 3 in his hand. The current Cross Union is safer than Wangguo, and I feel relieved to stay with you. If possible, can I say a few words to Bryn? Of course there is no problem. Mr. 3 smiled and winked at the little brother who was in charge of taking care of Bryn. The little brothers understood instantly, and untied the ropes that bound Bryn in the cloth strips around her mouth, allowing her to move freely. After the 2 brothers and sisters briefly confirmed each other's situation through the phone bug, Mr. 3 said some polite words to Katakuri and then hung up the phone. In the hall of Cake Island, looking at the card that had carefully put away the communication phone bug, Parasparrow, the leader of Big Mom Pirates, walked slowly. Is this really okay? there are some vicious people in the Cross Union. And once my mother recovers from amnesia, this matter can't be handled well, but it will become very troublesome. There was worry in his voice. As a three-eyed sister, Bryn has the potential to interpret historical texts. With her mother's personality, she will definitely take severe revenge on Buggy. At that time, the alliance between the Cross Union and the Big Mom Pirates will be completely broken. Now we are not the opponents of the Cross Guild, which has gathered most of the Shichibukai. Katakuri tightened the scarf around his neck with a stern expression. For some reason, that domineering and thin figure suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. As for Bryn's safety, there should be no need to worry. I believe in Mr. Three's character. I can only wait for my mother to regain consciousness before planning in detail. As a pirate group that has always maintained a cheerful atmosphere, the members of the Crusaders Guild who had washed up opened a grand banquet in Bali as a matter of course under Buggy's announcement. The bonfire was brightly lit, the wine was swayed, all kinds of big meat and fish were brought to the table, and the pirate song Bink's Wine was sung in a different style by the rough men. The little pirates hooked their shoulders and danced a clumsy and funny dance. Laughter completely dispelled the silence of the night, and the carnival feast of victory spread throughout the entire Kale Bali Island. Mr. Three didn't participate in the lively banquet for the first time like Buggy and others, making a scene. He found a relatively quiet corner, and sat with his legs crossed on the green grass, leaning against the big tree, enjoying the cool sea breeze blowing in front of him. It has to be said that the ease after the tension is quite intoxicating. Especially when looking past the two pairs of slender legs on the left and right sides, this comfort became more intense. Whether it's Reiju who changed into a pink casual outfit after washing up, or Ayasha who still looks like black long shorts, they are all first-class beauties, gaga seductive. It's really rare, Mr. Three, you actually stay here so quietly? Rayleigh, wearing flip-flops, came from the banquet center and threw the barrel glass full of fine wine towards Mr. Three. Whoosh! The wine glass flew in the air, and the wine swirled but did not spill. Mr. Three raised his hand to catch the wine glass firmly, and said with a light smile, Uncle Rayleigh, in your impression, shouldn't I stay quietly? No man can resist a party, especially a man like you. Rayleigh walked to Mr. Three and sat down, looking at Buggy who was making a fuss with the little pirates, his face showing a bit of vicissitudes showed a touch of emotion. He seemed to have seen the banquet held by the Roger Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates many years ago. Ha ha ha, that's true. Mr. Three laughed loudly, and raised his glass to Rayleigh. Rayleigh also raised the wine glass held by the other hand, and after a brief touch, both of them looked up and took a sip, quite carefree. After the awakening of Buggy Fruit's ability, the scale of the Cross Guild is not weaker than the peak Roger Pirates, and even a little bit stronger. After a brief pause, Rayleigh's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked Mr. Three a question that ordinary people could never refuse. You already have the qualifications to compete for the big secret treasure, how about it? Do you want to know the secret of Ralph Drew? Although Buggy is hard to say in terms of domineering, this guy's fruit ability is really strong, and his vision is wide enough, not to mention the real combat power of the four emperors, it is not far behind. In addition, there are many cards in front of him, which are enough to match Mr. Three, the strongest Blackbeard, Hancock who mastered the new system of Overlord color burning, the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk, and many powerful former Shichibukai, sixth layers of prisoners. Even if his old bones are not counted, the comprehensive combat power of the Cross Guild has reached a terrifying level. So, after several times of thinking, Rayleigh made this decision in his mind. Great secret treasure. Mr. Three was taken aback for a moment, then fell silent for a while. Ayasha and Reiju, who were standing by and waiting, also shrank their pupils, and immediately regained their energy, quietly pricking up their ears to eavesdrop. People who live in this era of great pirates, whether they are pirates or not, are very curious about the legendary great secret treasure. To the surprise of the two women, after taking a sip of wine, Mr. Three shook his head. Forget it, I'm actually not very interested in Ralph Drew. Oh? Rayleigh raised the corner of his mouth and let out a sound of surprise. Mr. Three looked up at the bright night sky above his head, opened his mouth slowly, and uttered his truest thoughts. My goal is to become stronger and freer. Naturally, I can't miss the opportunity of a big secret treasure. As the scenery on the road to becoming stronger, if you know it in advance, you will lose a lot of fun and surprises. I think this should also be Buggy's idea. Isn't the reason why pirates flock to the treasure map because the adventures during the period are interesting and the endpoint is full of unknowns? With Buggy's current status, there is no problem at all in obtaining a large amount of gold, silver and jewelry. Just staying in Kale Bali Island has countless money. But the fact is, if you give Ralph Drew's pointer to Buggy, who is keen on treasure hunting, this guy will definitely set sail. Ha 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 ha. I didn't expect that the information that so many people are eager to get is so cheap here. Seemingly getting the answer he wanted, Raleigh laughed heartily. Ayasha and Reiju, who missed this kind of heavy news, were disappointed. They subconsciously thought that Rayleigh was talking about the third brother and Buggy, but Mr. 3 knew very well that the "you" also included the same refusal in the end. Island intelligence Luffy. Speaking of which, why didn't you see that girl Hancock? Raleigh looked around and asked instead. That guy doesn't have the slightest interest in the banquet, so he returned to Blazing Island early. So that's the case. I guess it's the same situation. This time the crusade against the Blackbeard pirates, the little guys in Daughter Country are all worried. When it came to the country of women, Mr. 3's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help gossiping. By the way, Uncle Rayleigh, how did you and Sister Shaki meet? This is. Raleigh scratched his head, smiled heartily, but did not decline politely, but simply talked about Shaki's experience with Mr. 3. It wasn't until Hawkeye came with a wineglass that Rayleigh slowly got up and talked about swordsmanship with the #1 swordsman of this era. Not long after, Crocodile, who was wearing a black suit and had a big back, walked over again. Looking at each other with Mr. 3 who was sitting on the ground, Crocodile, who was biting a cigar and wearing an inexplicable smile, fixed his eyes, bursting out with a fleeting and powerful aura. Feeling the all-too-familiar domineering, Mr. 3's eyes widened in shock. After repeated confirmation, he asked with joy on his face. Yes, Crocodile, I didn't expect you to take this step. That's right. The aura erupted by Crocodile just now is the symbol of the King of the Sea, domineering and domineering. Hee. Isn't this a matter of course? The arrogant Crocodile is very satisfied with Mr. 3's expression, but his tone of voice is calm. Mr. 3 rolled his eyes, grinned at the corner of his mouth, and asked in a doubtful tone. Would it be the third brother on the Candle battlefield, who asked you to let go of your insignificant arrogance, but instead have a clear state of mind and awaken your domineering look? Don't fart your mother. The calmness on Crocodile's face could not be maintained at that time, and the cheeks that were covered with seams were slightly hot. It seems that I guessed well. Mr. 3 chuckled, and was also very satisfied with Crocodile's embarrassing and stubborn attitude. That's why I didn't like you a long time ago. The outraged Crocodile spread out his palms, and the miniature sandstorm in his palms spun at high speed. After a few seconds, he finally waved his hand and took the initiative to withdraw the sandstorm attack. Having experienced the Battle of Beehive Island, he thoroughly recognized the gap between himself and Mr. 3. Although I don't know whether this guy's potential has exploded, or he has been hiding his strength since more than 10 years ago like Blackbeard. But the only thing that is certain is that if the current Mr. 3 is serious, he will be defeated without any accidents. Don't pay too much attention, after all, you are not the only one who hates me. Mr. 3 noticed Crocodile's subtle movements. I can't say but I can't fight, so in desperation, Crocodile had no choice but to continue to talk about the business. Perhaps due to the influence of the awakened domineering look, my fruit ability has also been further awakened. What he was referring to was naturally the iron sand effect rewarded by the system's branch objectives. An explanation that is barely acceptable, since Crocodile is so sensible. Mr. 3 doesn't have to come up with an explanation in the direction of technology like Weevil did. Really? From this point of view, we have gained a lot from this campaign against Blackbeard. Mr. 3 asked Ayasha behind him to fill up the cup, and raised it high towards Crocodile. In short, Crocodile, congratulations on successfully obtaining the qualification of king. Cheers. Cheers. Crocodile also raised his glass high. At times like this, you can actually openly say something about third brother. Mr. 3 silently gave a suggestion. Hearing this, Crocodile, who had just finished drinking, turned dark. Looking at Mr. 3's smiling face that deserved a beating, he still couldn't hold back after all, and with the mentality of being beaten in the worst case, he directly threw a violent sandstorm with his backhand. Call out. The yellow sand flying all over the sky added a unique style to the carnival banquet of the Cross Trade Union. In front of so many younger brothers in the audience, Mr. 3, who knew Crocodile's temper well, naturally did not fight back. Wings of freedom emerged from his back, rushed out of the bounds of the sandstorm, and fell safely back to the ground. 3. As expected of you, you originally wanted to save this show for the finale. Since you and Crocodile discovered it in advance, let's start it magnificently. Buggy. who was in the center of the banquet, stretched out his big red robe, opened his arms, and the awakened torn fruit ability bloomed, assimilating the surrounding environment. Little ones, let me see clearly with my eyes wide open, next. It's a performance feast for those with fruit abilities. It wasn't until the early morning glory emerged from the distant sky that the carnival feast of Kale Bali really came to an end. Everyone returned to their respective residences to rest, sorting out their thoughts on the Hive Island battle. At the same time, it is also preparing for the follow-up impact of this incident. After all, destroying a sea emperor, especially a very special 4 emperors like Blackbeard, is not as simple as fighting and killing ordinary pirates. Not far from the base camp circus building, in a villa with the appearance of candles. Unlike everyone who was exhausted after the death battle, Mr. 3, who was restored by the Eternal Wax Museum, was in good physical and mental condition. With excitement, he stayed alone in the room and slowly closed his eyes, and began to check the mission rewards for attacking Blackbeard. Successfully kill the 3 brothers and sisters of Blackbeard, wipe out the Blackbeard pirates, and achieve the main goal of the 4 emperors' hegemony.
Target Reward 3. Fruit Ability Development Capsule 1. Third Brother S. Domineering Lecture 1. Red Road Sign History Text, Phantom Beast Devil Fruit.
Third Brother S. Domineering Lecture. Teaching members of the Cross Union, actual combat, can double the improvement effect of the target S3 color domineering during the course. According to the quality of the teaching, the host can gain the same amount of domineering growth. Slightly change the previous setting, so that it is more in the river. Event Evaluation. Meticulous and detailed pre-war preparations, unexpected lightning strikes, stunning clone tactics, bold and careful at the same time, fully embodies the tactical art of confrontation between forces. It is a very exciting battle of the 4 emperors. Special Event Trigger Rewards. A World Torn Apart. Chairman Buggy successfully awakened the fruit ability, and became the Clown King, the upper limit of the number of Eternal Wax Museums +1. Former Admiral Kuzan joins. Eternal Wax Museum restores the upper limit state from 80% to 100%. They are all relatively familiar system rewards, and Mr. 3 glanced over them one by one. As a crucial prop for traveling through the early stage, the Fruit Ability Awakening Capsule has no effect on him now. But what the Crusaders Guild, which has gathered many powerful people, lacked most is all kinds of capable people. Especially for bug-level fruits like Ayasha and Hancock, if they can be awakened with capsules, the power can be imagined. Although the domineering lecture hall is not as simple and rude as before, it can improve the other members of the Cross Union and become stronger while strengthening its own 3-color domineering. As far as the comprehensive combat power and long-term development of the entire pirate group are concerned, it is extremely critical. The ultimate goal of the Crusaders is to capture the Holy Land of Marie Joa and completely overthrow the rule of the Tianlong people. Before that, if double-digit generals can be cultivated, the chances of winning will be greatly improved. Or to be more precise, this condition is necessary in the face of the Navy headquarters under the rule of the world government. From this crusade against the Blackbeard pirates, Mr. 3 realized the importance of partners, and the bond with the members of the Cross Guild including Buggy became deeper. So one of the next development directions is to let the cadres below the Emperor level of the Cross Trade Union go further and prepare for the future battle of the century. Of course, it's still early days. Mr. 3 continued to look down. There was nothing to say in the history text of the Red Road sign, but it was the unspecified Phantom Beast Devil Fruit, which aroused his curiosity. It's a pity that among his 3-color arrogance, only the Overlord color arrogance has reached the extreme stage. Both the knowledge color and the armed color are not ready enough, and they cannot meet the conditions of fruit ability breakthrough and 2 devil fruits in the body. Phantom Beast Devil Fruit. With a slight movement of Mr. 3's mind, a fruit pattern imprinted with strange patterns appeared in front of his eyes. The devil fruit in the One Piece world is born of various expectations and dreams of human beings, and is disgusted by the mother seed because it violates the laws of nature. Although he doesn't have a complete devil fruit illustration book, it is conceivable that the devil fruit rewarded by the system is definitely not too ordinary. Physical fitness and resilience are his biggest shortcomings at this stage, and these two are precisely the advantages of the Phantom Beast Devil Fruit. As long as this defect is made up, Mr. 3 will become a real hexagonal warrior. Thinking of this, Mr. 3 slowly opened the system panel that he hadn't seen for a long time. The strongest Emperor subsystem, host, Mr. 3. Appearance, charm of personality, 93, physical fitness, SS. Lucky value, A+ SS. The Clown Buggy Camp after the ability awakening has its own buff, and it will disappear when you leave it. Abilities. Waxy Fruit, Awakened, Breakthrough Progress. 1/3, Armed Color Domineering, Advanced, Internal Destruction, Knowledge Color Domineering, Advanced, Foreseeing the Future, Domineering Color Domineering, Extreme, Tyrannical Entanglement, Domineering, Physical Destruction, Knowledge Killing. Props. Third Brother S. Domineering Lecture Hall, Fruit Ability Development Capsule 3, Red Road Sign History Text 2, Rubbing Version, Phantom Beast Devil Fruit, Former Navy Admiral Chingchi Sea Bicycle, 75% Progress in Refining Black Car, Eternal Wax Figure Hall, Accommodating Number 4, Cooling. 3, Wings of Liberty, Vegapunk Mysterious Technology Box 2. Main Goal. 4 Emperors Contend for Hegemony. Target Reward 3. Fruit Ability Development Capsule, Red Road Sign History Text, Ancient Weapon Design Blueprint. Accompanied goal of the main line, form a large fleet. Strong support is the guarantee for the stability and strength of the pirate group, looking for potential pirate groups and taking them under their command to form a large ship group. Target Reward. According to the target pirate group, improve the comprehensive strength of core members, dominant, fruit ability, physical skills. Sub-question. Doflamingo's Trust. Successfully gain Doflamingo's heartfelt trust and admiration. Target Reward. The Secret of Tinlongren, 3-color domineering enhancement. Moria's Invincible Heart. Help Moria regain the confidence in fighting against Kaido. Target Reward. Shadow Space. Hawkeye's Fated Showdown. Help Hawkeye to further his strength and successfully defeat his old enemy, the red-haired Shanks. Target Reward. Swordsmanship Cheats. The awakening of Buggy's fruit ability actually drives the luck value of the entire camp? At a glance, Mr. 3 noticed this obvious change. Although the lucky value is very abstract and not as intuitive as combat props, it is one of the very important attributes. Without the support of strong luck, it would be difficult for the Cross Guild to reach its current scale, and it would also be impossible to achieve the zero-death record of the cadres and captains in this crusade against the Blackbeard pirates. From this point of view alone, Buggy, who has awakened his fruit and become tyrannical, is indeed an indispensable soul figure of the Crusades. It really deserves to be the only domineering luck in the pirate world. Mr. 3 muttered to himself, expressing emotion in a low voice. After briefly counting the harvest of the surprise attack on the Blackbeard pirates, he lay on the big soft bed with his head in his hands, and began to plan the next action plan of the Cross Guild. The super weapon that appeared above the Hive Island, capable of destroying the entire large island in a few seconds, made him have to make some changes to the current layout of the Cross Guild. Even if there are many restrictions on this level of killer, and it may not be able to be used continuously in a short period of time, Mr. 3 must prepare for the worst. Red Earth Continent, Holy Land Mary Joa. In the magnificently decorated conference hall, all the 5 old stars of the power center of the world government are present, all with solemn faces. I didn't expect that even that thing would not be able to wipe out all the cross guilds. A 5 old star sitting on the sofa said in a deep voice, "The news of Blackbeard's defeat will soon spread throughout the world. By then, the influence of the Cross Union will definitely expand. For us, this is already a big trouble no less than the Revolutionary Army." Hearing this, Wu Laoxing, who was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows in the hall, sighed heavily, and then said, "Compared to this, the impact of Kuzan's unpredictable guy is even more serious. It's hard to believe that such a powerful combat force would choose the Cross Union. His purpose is not simple. I knew that when I left the Navy, I should have taken care of him." Number 3 Wu Laoxing's face was full of sternness. Things have come to this point, even for them, it is difficult to make changes. They all have a premonition that the Cross Guild, which has assembled most of the Shichibukai and obtained the highest combat power Kuzan, is bound to become a more troublesome superpower in the near future than the Rocks pirates back then. Perhaps, it's time for us to make some strategic changes and preparations. A 5 old star gave a suggestion in a deep voice. This was nodded and agreed by the other 4 5 old stars. After the unparalleled battle on Beehive Island, even they, who are firmly at the center of world power, feel an invisible pressure. Different from the gloomy and melancholy atmosphere in the Mary Joya Conference Hall, it is the Navy headquarters, the Admiral's office. The Crusaders Union really made a huge event this time. It is said that Kuzan has joined them. Just thinking about the lineup is scary. Wearing a yellow General's Justice cloak, Paluzolino the Yellow Ape crossed his arms and sat in front of the sofa with his tall Erlang legs raised. The words sounded full of panic, but the tone was as lazy and leisurely as ever. "It doesn't matter if you join Blackbeard or Buggy, anyway, That idiot has nothing to do with us. On the marshal's table, Akainu Sakaski took a deep breath, blew out a puff of smoke rings, and the corners of his mouth curled into a shallow arc. As for the Cross Guild, although Buggy and Mr. 3 were not able to be buried with their own hands, in the final analysis, they wiped out the Blackbeard pirates and helped us get rid of a big trouble. Green Bull, who was sitting opposite, slowly raised his head, and couldn't help but say, "But in this way, will they develop to the point that even we can't control them after they get all kinds of resource territories from the Blackbeard pirates?" The point? As the only admiral who has dealt with Mr. 3 several times, even though Aramu wanted to tear this man who made him miserable, he had to admit a fact. That is, Mr. 3's commanding and planning ability, and even his potential luck, are too terrifying. Obviously, Sakaski, who has a sharp and shrewd gaze, is also very aware of this. But it was precisely because of this that his eyes were full of fighting spirit and passion. That's better. The smile on the corner of Sakaski's mouth became more intense and deep. The self-righteous pests are all gathered in one place. When the volcano erupts, it can be cleaned up at once, isn't it? Both the yellow ape and the green cow shrank their pupils, showing surprise.
Sokolsky, do you mean you want to? Because the news of the Hive Island War was too shocking, the relevant news and the new reward list were not released immediately.
Under the dissemination and fermentation of various pirate forces in many channels, the storm caused by the real life and death duel of the top 4 emperors is even more topical than the original Luoluji Supernova Alliance versus Kaido Mama Double 4 Emperors. After all, even the battle between the world's greatest swordsman and the legendary pirate Barrett is just one of the battlefields. With the flow of information from various sources, gradually, some pirate forces began to call the Cross Guild the strongest 4 emperors, yearning for it, desperately wanting to join. What's even more outrageous is that Buggy, the Clown King, has already been transformed into 1002 ways, and he is about to land on the final island of Ralph Drew, becoming the pirate king of this new era after Roger. All forces are ready to move, making the already chaotic era even more turbulent. At this time, the Cross Trade Union, which has become the center of the world's storm, has ushered in a very rare calm. In the afternoon of the second day after the banquet, in the meeting room of the circus building in the base camp, Hancock, Crocodile, Hawkeye and other cadres all arrived, and the cross-union strategy meeting led by Buggy and Mr. 3 started. Before the official content begins, Buggy solemnly introduces the new member to everyone, the former Navy Admiral Kuzan. Everyone has been in contact with familiar faces for several years, and with Kuzan's life-saving rescue on Hive Island, the captains naturally expressed their sincere welcome. Taking advantage of this topic, as a matter of course, Buggy, as the president, appointed Hawkeye as the captain of the division of the Cross Guild in the order of joining, and also stormed the battle. Appoint Kuzan as the captain of the division of the Cross Union, and part-time as the captain of the Special Operations Force. In addition, Moria's intern captain was erased, and he officially became the captain of the part-time auxiliary reinforcement unit of the 6th team. Upon hearing the news, Moria burst into tears of joy, lamenting that it was not easy. After the Battle of Beehive Island, after thoroughly seeing the unparalleled strength and development potential of the Cross Union, he no longer feels dissatisfied in his heart. To be able to stay in such a pirate group, he should feel secretly happy, maybe it should be himself. After roughly explaining some of the powers and responsibilities of the captain, as well as the distribution of personnel, the whole meeting officially entered the topic, the next development plan. The idea of Mr. 3 is very simple, that is to act in a low-key manner and strive for as much time as possible to develop smoothly. Considering that the world government, IMM, has a super weapon capable of destroying the island, although it will be more or less troublesome, it is obvious that the configuration of the Crusaders Union that concentrates core cadres in one base camp must not continue. So, Mr. 3, who took the teacup from Ayasha behind him and took a sip of strong tea, made a bold proposal that shocked the audience as soon as he opened his mouth. On the premise of ensuring that each other can quickly support each other, with Kale Bali as the center, build a pirate kingdom similar to the Big Mom pirates. Building multiple islands around Bali is no small project. Crocodile, who was smoking a big cigar, raised his head and glanced at Mr. 3, his voice was calm with a unique magnetism. It is indeed very difficult to build an artificial island, and it will definitely be difficult to achieve it in a short period of time by conventional means. Mr. 3 raised his hand and pushed the rebuilt goggles, a confident smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. However, the most indispensable thing here is a person who is comparable to nature and capable of creating miracles. His wax fruit has been awakened, especially the iron sand effect obtained after the completion of the crocodile branch line, its strength and hardness are far beyond the scope of ordinary candles. Using this kind of super candle is the foundation to support the island. Although it is not naturally stable, it is not a big problem to keep it for 3 to 5 years. On the basis of super candles, it is combined with Mingo's awakened thread fruit, Kuzan's frozen fruit that can permanently change the climate and environment, and Crocodile's rustling fruit that also has an iron sand effect. It is not difficult to create the basic outline of the island in a short time. Of course, the infrastructure, environment and landforms on the island will require follow-up manpower to complete. For the Cross Union, which has huge resources and younger brothers, it is even easier to do it. After simply answering the detailed questions raised by everyone, the bold idea of building a new One Piece kingdom was quickly determined. In addition to basic facilities, I also want these islands to have a certain degree of counterattack weapons. This project is going to be handed over to the highly technological Vinsmoke family. Mr. 3 turned his head to look at Reiju, who was standing behind him, and asked aloud, "Reiju, help me contact Jiaji later, and you can talk about the remuneration and the like." Germa 66 is now an ally of the Cross Guild and a humanoid weapon research partner, but Mr. 3 has long wanted to acquire this faction whose technological level is much higher than the average level of the pirate world. As long as Germa 66 comes to Kale Bali, he will have enough confidence to complete the recruitment of Jiaji. However, what Reiju said next surprised Mr. 3, and his wishful thinking was shattered. "Third brother, that, in fact, my Lord Father gave me the news early in the morning that the Kingdom of Germa wanted to request to join the Cross Union." After that, Reiju relayed Gaji's words with a blank face. Most of them were gaudy and polite words, but in summary, the Cross Guild can even defeat the alliance of Blackbeard and Barrett, and its strength has already surpassed the other 4 emperors. Germa wants to be sheltered. Naturally, Mr. 3 did not refuse this kind of door-to-door request. With his current strength and status, the Germa kingdom can only be regarded as a small Karami. After joining, the power position and other related matters do not even need to be done by himself, and they can be directly handed over to the people under him. With the joining of the Kingdom of Germa, which represents the technology module, the only shortcoming of the Cross Union in the general direction has been supplemented, and it has become a behemoth second only to the world government in the true sense. After this brief episode, Mr. 3 continued to explain the planned development route to the cadres. Since the next focus is to shift from the individual to the collective, the main goal of the 4 emperors' struggle for hegemony comes with a sideline that can strengthen everyone's overall strength. That is to say, the formation of a large fleet can be carried out simultaneously with the construction of the pirate kingdom. In today's new world, apart from the unshakable 4 emperor pirates, the ones that most meet the conditions for forming a large ship group are naturally the supernovas that have shown their prominence in the past 2 years. Although the strength of this group of newcomers is a little weaker, they are the most representative figures in a stage after all, possessing considerable potential and value. After careful weighing, Mr. 3 finally decided to entrust the recruiting and trust formation of the big ship group to the tool people such as Yorita, Kabaji, Moki, and Lion Lakey. They have been strengthened through devil training, and with the assistance of the younger brother who has a bounty of over 500 million from the Cross Union, it is not a big problem to subdue the newcomers who have just shown themselves. After confirming the details of these 2 general directions, the meeting on the future planning of the Cross Trade Union came to an end with the announcement of the President Buggy. The cadres left the field one after another and returned to their area. After babbling a few unnutritive nonsense with Buggy, Mr. 3 got up and left, and at the same time called out the little fangirl Ayasha. The 2 walked side by side on the forest path in Kale Bali. "No, this is the candle statue that I promised you before." Mr. 3 took out his own candle figure from his pocket. Its posture is natural, and it is the most handsome appearance of dancing in a cape and dancing with aloofness. This. Although Ayasha wanted to say that what she wanted was a 1-to-1 size, she still stretched out her hands and carefully took the figure from Mr. 3. After holding it in front of her eyes for a while like a treasure, the little girl's bright and moving eyes instantly turned into the shape of shining stars. Well, the workmanship is so fine, whether it is the facial expressions or the details of the clothes, they are all exactly the same as the miniature version of the real third brother. Compared with the ones that are still treasured in the bedroom, this is simply a super perfect work of art. It's amazing, it's really awesome. Ayasha's pretty face was full of joy. She held the wax figure and looked up and down, left and right, trying to find the safest place to store it, but she couldn't do anything. "You don't need to be so careful. If it's damaged, I'll make another one for you," Mr. 3 said nonchalantly. "How can I do that? This is an idol." Ayasha was very serious. Although the real idol is standing in front of me at this moment. Knowing this guy's temper well, Mr. 3 shrugged helplessly, so he had no choice but to raise his hand and make a strong candle protective cover. The little girl immediately beamed with joy, a very bright smile. The two of them walked on the small mountain road like this. Third brother, what are we going to do next? Ayasha, who finally noticed that the route was not quite right, asked aloud. Hearing this, Mr. 3 rose slightly uncontrollably, and replied quite simply and rudely. Go teach those captains who think so highly of themselves a good lesson. It's hard to get the first wave of rewards from the 4 Emperors contest, no matter what, you have to try the effect of the third brother's domineering lecture hall, right? Moreover, Mr. 3 does have a lot of problems and needs to talk to them individually.
For example, the reason why Kuzan chose to join the Cross Guild's thoughts and goals, such as the degree of Crocodile's control over Ba Wang's domineering, and for example, how much Doflamingo, who was born in Tianlong, knows about the super weapons on Hive Island.
10 minutes later, the vision in front of them suddenly opened up, and what appeared in front of their eyes was an open plain. In the center of the plain stands a small castle-like building. At the entrance, a crocodile statue with teeth and claws is very conspicuous. Here is the area where Crocodile, the captain of the third team, is located. The sea breeze blew across the weedy plain, bringing a rustling sound. The two figures stood facing each other, and the breeze blew the cloaks and coats behind them. It's Mr. 3 and Crocodile. Mr. 3, you came here on purpose, not only to test my control over the domineering color, right? Crocodile lowered his eyes and landed on the malicious smile at the corner of Mr. 3's mouth opposite him, feeling an unpleasant intuition in his heart. Well, we have to see Ni's domineering look before making a conclusion. Mr. 3 crossed his arms and looked calm. The current him is no longer the rookie who fought desperately to draw with Crocodile in the Sanju roundabout. So even though he could feel Crocodile's displeasure at this moment, he was still calm and composed. It's a really irritating tone. Crocatter had a gloomy expression, and the next second, the corners of his mouth slowly rose again, revealing a smile. However, since you are so curious, then I will reluctantly let you feel it. The moment the voice fell, Crocodile's eyes stared suddenly, and an invisible storm was generated from under his feet, condensing into a domineering pressure with a sense of oppression, and exerting it heavily on Mr. 3 who is not far away. As expected, in such a short period of time, you have been able to retract and release freely. Mr. 3 sighed in a low voice. Different from other kings with domineering aura, Crocodile, who has been in the New World for many years and has fought against many top powerhouses, whether it is the accumulation of experience or his own perception. His understanding of overlord color and arrogance is far superior to those rookies who have just awakened and started to practice from scratch. With the king's arrogance and ambition he showed, it is not surprising that he can freely control the release of the overlord color in a short period of time. Of course, more or less still a little unskilled. Mr. 3 stood still at the same spot, and after carefully feeling Crocodile's slightly disordered domineering aura, he moved his finger lightly, and did not keep it. Boom. The dark red thunder and lightning jumped, and the gray-white overlord-colored arrogance bloomed like a stormy sea, breaking the light yellow arrogance field built by Crocodile into pieces, turning it into a sky filled with ups and downs of light. The domineering arrogance of the two sides is so different that at the moment of contact, the winner is determined. Is this the true spirit of your fellow? The frenzied airflow blew Crocodile's back head into a mess, and the corners of his smiling mouth couldn't help twitching. Through this head-to-head collision of domineering colors, he finally experienced very deeply and clearly the fierceness of Mr. 3's domineering, which is more terrifying than the demon monsters from hell. This is the real king. This time, the proud Crocodile did not feel ashamed or angry because the other party was once his subordinate. On the contrary, he, who had long recognized Mr. 3, erupted in extremely strong fighting spirit at this moment. He decided to face himself, determine the strength gap between the two sides, and then become stronger, and even surpass it. It's been a long time since I touched you, come on, Mr. 3. Right on my mind. Mr. 3 withdrew his coercive domineering aura, spewing out continuously expanding gray candles from his arms, colliding with Crocodile that turned into yellow sand all over the sky. The gray and white and black and yellow tones immediately replaced the greenness on this vast plain. Because this is the base camp of the Crusaders' Union and the area where Crocodile works and manages, the battle between the two naturally converges a lot, and the scope of the battle is restricted within a radius of 1 kilometer. This made the requirements for their attack precision and move accuracy more stringent. After about an hour, the battle ended. Crocodile stretched his hands and feet and lay flat on the grass in a big shape. The handsome hunched head was completely blown off, and the hair fell down, covering half of the cheeks, looking very embarrassed. The winner of this battle is Mr. 3 standing by. With Crocodile's physical strength, it is unlikely that he would be defeated so quickly. It's just that this arrogant and unyielding guy insisted on competing with Mr. 3 for domineering, which led to the rapid consumption of strength. Still, that's exactly what Mr. 3 wants. After all, the more Crocodile's domineering energy is consumed, the better the third brother's domineering lecture will be, and the enhancement he can get will naturally increase. Although the effect is not particularly obvious, he can still feel the subtle changes in the three-color arrogance in his body. It's worth the trip. Mr. 3 was full of interest, and after saying goodbye to Crocodile briefly, he took Ayasha and moved on, looking for the next victim. Oh no, it's the next person to be taught, the captain of the 5th team, Amayasha Doflamingo. When we came to the southwest corner of Kale Bali, inside the building where the 5th team was located, Doflamingo, who was wearing a pink feather coat, was enjoying red wine leisurely. In the magnificently decorated hall, members of the original Don Quixote family, such as Pica, Diamante, and Sugar, are here. After coming out of Advance City and joining the Cross Union, Doflamingo naturally called back this group of former subordinates. The last mysterious weapon information that appeared on Hive Island? After learning the reason for Mr. 3's visit, Doflamingo gently shook the red wine glass in his hand with a domineering and iconic smile on his mouth. I do know part of the information. If you want to know, you can exchange it with something equivalent, Poochie. Responding to Doflamingo's unruly gesture was Mr. 3's incomparably enthusiastic candle. Obviously, for an arrogant person like Doflamingo, the simplest and most effective way to teach him is to beat him up. You bastard, you're already so strong, and you even gave me a sneak attack. Standing up from the mess, Doflamingo suddenly showed his veins, and rushed towards Mr. 3 while pulling countless silk threads. He was naturally very aware of the gap in strength between himself and Mr. 3, but he didn't want to miss out on the rare opportunity to compete with the Emperor-level powerhouse. Doflamingo is unwilling to experience the embarrassing situation where Kaido needs to be submissive in the face of the 4 emperors before. Therefore, only those who face up to this level of powerhouse can break through their own limitations. Thinking of this, Doflamingo's eyes surged with fighting spirit, and he rushed to Mr. 3 without fear. After a fierce battle, like his old partner Crocodile, he was crushed as expected, lying flat on the ground thinking about life. Damn it, the gap is so big, Doflamingo roared with resignation. Next to him, members of the Don Quixote family comforted him. Mr. 3 clapped his hands, and was just about to have a good talk with Doflamingo about the Tianlong Ren super weapon, when a sudden system notification sound came from the back of his mind. Successfully gained Doflamingo's trust and admiration from the bottom of his heart, the sub-objective, Doflamingo's trust, has been completed. Target reward. Some secrets of Tianlong people, 3-color domineering enhancement. Unexpectedly, the super weapon that appeared on the Hive Island actually hides such a secret. According to the rewards provided by the side missions, Mr. 3 has a general understanding of the terrifying power possessed by the Tianlong IM. Also, some of the events that happened in the disappearing 100 years are about the mystery of the origin of the ancient science and technology kingdom. Mr. 3, I'm convinced. Feel free to ask any questions you want. Doflamingo, whose sunglasses were all crooked, sat on the ground. Even though his face was ashamed and embarrassed, he still had his iconic smile on his lips. But you have to think about it. Once you touch this kind of taboo, you must be ready to face the endless pursuit of the Tianlong people. After this period of contact, he is very clear about Mr. 3's character and temper. How could this man, who dared to kidnap, use, or even seriously injure even the Tianlong people, be afraid of being targeted by the world government? The main reason why he took the initiative to mention this matter is that Doflamingo wants to buy and sell by force, and exchange what he wants with Mr. 3. However, what he never expected was that Mr. 3 shrugged his shoulders rather bluntly, showing a frightened look. So that's how it sounds. It sounds scary. Forget it. I suddenly don't want to know. Under Doflamingo's wide-eyed and unbelievable gaze, Mr. 3 just turned around and started to leave here. Hey! Mr. 3, what the hell do you mean by this? Doflamingo yelled loudly. What is this? Came here specifically to do nothing, just beat him up and leave. The underground emperor who once controlled the entire Dressrosa suddenly became furious. Of course I came to teach you a lesson. Mr. 3 waved his back to Doflamingo. The little girl Ayasha, who was waiting beside her, followed closely. Doflamingo with a gloomy face slowly raised his arm covered with transparent silk threads, and after carefully comparing the fighting strength of the two sides, he put it back silently. As if aware of it, Mr. 3 stopped in his tracks, turned around and said slowly, "By the way, Doflamingo, do you want to know more about the Overlord color burning?" Hearing this, Doflamingo's frowning brows suddenly loosened, and his eyes hidden under the sunglasses burst into a fiery look. In the Battle of Hive Island, after witnessing Hancock's Overlord color burning, as a veteran strongman with Overlord color domineering, he was completely attracted by this mysterious method. And this is exactly what he wants to secretly exchange with Mr. 3 with the Tinlongren. It's a silly trick that the weak will use. How can a truly powerful person need such a fancy thing? The arrogant Doflamingo snorted coldly, stood up from the ground, and patted the feather coat on his body. Of course, if you're willing to share, I'll help you find possible flaws. Mr. 3. Seeing the nonchalant expression on Doflamingo's face, he just wanted to say in his heart, "You deserve it." He directly ignored Doflamingo's words, and said with an inexplicable smile, "If you want to learn, call third brother to listen." When he was weaker than these veteran Shi Wuhai, he was obedient, but now that his strength has reached the emperor level, what reason is there not to strike hard? The calm look on Doflamingo's face suddenly became unstoppable, and he gritted his teeth angrily. "Mr. 3, you bloody bastard." He was struggling in his heart, and after weighing several times, he finally made a decision in order to become stronger. The shadowy eyes turned slowly, and fell on the surrounding Don Quixote family cadres. Pica, Diamante, Granos and the others realized instantly, raised their hands to cover their ears tightly, and turned and left talking to themselves. After all his subordinates had gone away, Doflamingo rubbed his back teeth and said slowly, Third brother." Puff. Seeing the rare shriveled look of Doflamingo, who has always been rebellious, Mr. 3 couldn't hold back for a while, and laughed out loud. The Don Quixote cadres who walked away also turned their heads, showing expressions of having seen the new world. How should I put it? The young master in front of me, whose mouth twitches wildly, seems quite cute. Just like the system prompt of the side mission, Doflamingo, who never trusts people easily, has already regarded Mr. 3 as a partner from the bottom of his heart. This is the fundamental reason why he is willing to call out third brother in person. And these cadres who have followed Doflamingo for many years can naturally feel the change in the young master's mood. Thinking of this, a faint smile appeared on their faces unconsciously. Unlike Mr. 3's ridicule value was full, they were sincerely happy. The red-faced Doflamingo quickly rushed to Mr. 3, grabbed his collar and said viciously, "Say it. If you dare to lie to me, I will tear your mouth apart." Cough cough. Mr. 3 coughed twice. Knowing Doflamingo's character well, he did not continue to die, but answered seriously. "Doflamingo, the essence of the Overlord color burning is to entangle the Overlord color on the outside and perfectly act on the body." After pausing for a few seconds, he continued, "So if you want to learn Ba Ran, first of all, you have to learn Ba Wan color winding." The moment these words were said, the coldness comparable to the Kuzan Ice Age kept coming out of Doflamingo's body with a dark expression. That is to say, even Mao can't learn from Lao Tzu's sacrifice? Seeing that Doflamingo was about to go violent and black, Mr. 3 rolled his eyes and said seriously, "On the contrary, Doflamingo, I always believe that it is definitely not difficult for a king like you to comprehend the entanglement of a mere overlord. Doflamingo's situation is actually very similar to Hancock's. The two of them have spent a long time in awakening their domineering colors, and the experience they should have accumulated has reached the extreme. The distance from mastering the standard overlord color entanglement of the emperor-level powerhouse is just a short chance and courage. And this shortcoming, under the double 3-color domineering enhancement of the domineering lecture hall of the third brother and the system branch tasks, I believe that Doflamingo will soon break through the shackles and step into the ranks of top powerhouses." Mr. 3's sudden firmness and trust, on the contrary, can't fix Doflamingo. I saw him loosen the collar he was holding tightly, turned around, and walked back to the cadres with steps that his relatives did not recognize. "Isn't this kind of thing a matter of course for me? I'll leave the overlord burning skills to you for now." The arrogant Tien Yasha said, "Remember Mr. 3, this is what you owe me." After being reminded by Mr. 3, Doflamingo realized belatedly that his 3-color arrogance had been greatly improved since he didn't know when. This put him in a good mood, so he didn't bother to argue too much with Mr. 3. After coming out of Doflamingo's territory, Mr. 3 gave Weevil of the 4th team and Moria of the 6th team a good lesson. These two were relatively easy to deal with, and there is not much pressure to beat them up. Therefore, he also severely harvested a wave of small enhancements of the 3-color domineering. When passing by the castle-like building where Hawkeye Mihawk was, Mr. 3 gave up the idea of fighting after careful consideration. It's not that he's afraid of Hawkeye, it's just that the price of fighting the world's #1 swordsman is too high, the outcome is unpredictable, and the domineering lecture hall of the third brother is difficult to play a role. After briefly explaining to Hawkeye the questions related to the Overlord color burning, Mr. 3 got up and left quickly. Followed by Ayasha, the two came to Kuzan's residence. Because Kuzan's joining was too sudden, the newly formed 8th Division has not yet designated areas and building facilities, so Kuzan temporarily lives on the 3rd floor of the Central Circus building. The reason for choosing the Cross Union. On the tea table, Kuzan and Mr. 3 sat facing each other, while Ayasha acted as the waiter serving tea and water. Kuzan's gaze moved away from the cloudy strong tea on the table and landed on Mr. 3. Did I already tell you when the New World launched a surprise attack on you? I want to find out the truth of history, or to be more precise, why the Tianlong people exist in the world. As the highest combat power of the former Navy headquarters, an admiral who needs to be dispatched by the world government, he has been in contact with the Tianlong people for a long time, and has deeply witnessed the ugly faces of these so-called world nobles. Because of this, he chose to leave the hard-to-change and restrained Navy headquarters, and instead joined the Blackbeard Pirates, which can do things conveniently. What he never expected was that this tool pirate group, chosen by himself to fulfill his ambition, would lose so suddenly. And you, who have gathered a large number of powerful people and can even barely confront the Navy headquarters, are the pirate group that is most likely to achieve this goal. Kuzan did not hide it, and truthfully stated what he thought in his heart. Mr. 3 took a sip of the steaming tea, and asked blankly, "That is to say, the Crusaders have replaced the role of the Blackbeard Pirates in your heart?" This situation is similar to what he guessed. After all, Kuzan himself has nothing to do with the members of the Cross Union. If you really want to talk about it, as a former admiral of the Navy headquarters, he has more or less had conflicts and frictions with the original Shichibukai. If he said such stupid things as longing for the Cross Union and willing to work for Buggy, Mr. 3 would definitely be the first to jump out and reject Kuzan's joining. Even if the opponent has the highest combat power, even if the opponent sacrifices his life to save him on Hive Island. That's pretty much what it means, but not quite. Seeing the surprise on Mr. 3's face, Kuzan turned his head and looked at Kale Bali Island outside the room through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the room. I heard from Buggy that the ultimate purpose of your establishment of the Cross Union is to overthrow the rule of the Tianlong people and dominate the world. Although it is an impractical and stupid idea, if there is such a day, I'm willing to help you. Hearing this, a sexy and gorgeous red nose immediately appeared in front of Mr. 3's eyes. The bastard who co-authored Buggy has mastered the essence of recruiting these top powerhouses, right? After making some complaints, Mr. 3 looked up at Kuzan and said with a soft smile, "It's really reassuring to have such a promise from the former admiral. Shouldn't you be suspicious?" Kuzan was puzzled, his previous identity was a lot of trouble. "There is nothing to doubt, no matter how you say it, you are now a member of our Cross Union." Mr. 3 put down the teacup in his hand, and said frankly, "If the partners don't even have the most basic trust, then there is no need for this pirate group to exist." Every word and every sentence shows the full courage of the top hero. If it weren't for reading the original book and knowing that Kuzan has a righteous way of life, Mr. 3 would have been so handsome by his current appearance. Kuzan on the opposite side was stunned for a moment, staring closely at Mr. 3's pupils. From that clear and pure gaze, he could not see any hypocrisy. As expected of a man who dared to blitz the black beard of the 4 emperors, even I can't match this courage. Kuzan sighed softly, breathed out a breath of cold air, and said with emotion, "No wonder those arrogant guys who live the most shrewd lives in this sea will willingly work for the Cross Union. It's all the personality charm of President Buggy." Mr. 3 laughed. Now that the topic of the Navy headquarters and the world government was mentioned, there was a pause for a few seconds, and Mr. 3's expression became serious again. "By the way, Kuzan, you once fought against Sakaski for 10 days and 10 nights. How is that guy's strength compared to mine? If you want to fight against the world government and completely overthrow the rule of the Tianlong people, the first thing you need to break through is naturally the Navy headquarters that guards the New World and serves the 5 old stars. The battle between the two sides is inevitable, so it is necessary to know the combat power of the strongest Sakaski in advance. Sokolsky. Kuzan naturally understood Mr. Three's thoughts, carefully considered the abilities of both parties, and gave a pertinent comparison. If you can maintain the state of domineering burning and shining golden light when you fought against Blackbeard Kina in the end, you should have no problem defeating Sakaski, who has extreme destructive power. In other words, is it difficult to defeat Sakaski outside the stage of tyrant burning and giving his life? Thinking of this, Mr. Three couldn't help asking, is that guy really that strong? Compared to 2 years ago, Sakaski's strength has become even more unfathomable in the 2 years since he became the admiral of the Navy headquarters. The most important thing for a strong man in the pirate world is invincible belief and mentality. The more confident a person is, the higher the possible upper limit of his arrogance. This point can be clearly concluded from the once decadent Crocodile and Moria. Kuzan glanced at Mr. Three and directly pointed out his flaws at this stage. If you can't resolve the battle in a short time and enter into a protracted battle with Sokolsky, defeat is inevitable. Mr. Three did not refute, but nodded slightly. Combined with Kuzan's inference, if he wants to get rid of Akainu Sakaski now, he will probably need to pay the price of 2 eternal wax museums. Before that, if you have successfully cultivated the 3-color domineering energy to the extreme, breaking through the fruit ability and eating the second fruit, you will save a lot of effort. Actually, if you are really strong enough to compete against the entire world government, that fellow Sakaski might not become an enemy. It seemed that it was unbelievable to say such words. Kuzan waved his hands again and again, and corrected, of course, this is just my own unfounded idea, you don't have to care about it. Blakesing Island, the last stop of Sanji's domineering lecture hall. On the spacious hill, stood 3 figures. 3, I admit that you are really ridiculously strong now, but you want to face me in Hancock at the same time, more or less reckless. Buggy is dressed as a clown, his upper body is suspended in the air, and his sinister face reveals inexplicable confidence. How terrifying the power I have now is far beyond your imagination. He clenched his fist towards the opposite Mr. Three, and activated the ability of fragmentation, disintegrating the fist into the size of dust that is difficult for the naked eye to catch, and then recondensed. After awakening the Devil Fruit ability, he was able to control his own fragmentation in more detail and accurately, breaking through to the limit that he had never had before. So, the rain stopped, the sky cleared up, and Buggy felt that he was doing well again. Buggy, I hope you won't hold back my concubine later. Wearing a black and white slim-fitting robe, Hancock parted his black hair, rolled his blue eyes, and glanced at Buggy next to him with disdain, or just find a hidden corner and hide. Bastard Hancock. Are you looking down on me? Buggy became angry immediately, completely disregarding that the other party was the most beautiful woman in the world, and cursed at the top of his voice. Seeing the two of them having internal strife before the fight started, Mr. Three couldn't help but let out a disdainful sneer. At this moment, Buggy, who was scolding Hancock a second ago, stared at him, and stepped on the ground under his feet. Whoosh whoosh. The hard rocky ground split into countless small pieces like tofu, and spread forward with lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, a raging wave of fragmentation spread to Mr. Three's feet. It's really your style to sneak attack while distracted by talking, Buggy. Unfortunately, the speed is still a little slower. Just when the fragmented assimilation effect was about to touch Mr. Three's body, the white wings fluttered, and the white jade-like wings of freedom bloomed, driving his body to fly high into the sky. Considering the gap between the two sides domineering, in order to maximize the effect of the third brother's domineering lecture, he did not use the knowledge-colored domineering that can predict the future. This thing is really a bit of a bug for opponents who can't predict the future or have the ultimate domineering look. Stop talking about yourself there, take the trick, Mr. Three, fragrant feet. Mr. Three had just stabilized his figure, and with a breath-filled shout from Yuji, Hancock jumped up high. After spinning her body at a high speed in midair to increase her strength, she came to Mr. Three without reservation, kicking her long legs covered in armed colors and domineering force. The violent kick brought a violent wind to rush towards him. Mr. Three's face was calm, and gray-white wax was constantly pouring out of his right arm. Sparks flickered and the right fist of the candle burst into flames. Candle flame breathing. Boom. The long pink legs collided head-on with the flaming fist, blasting out shockwaves round after round. Drink. Hancock yelled, and exerted the strength of his leg muscles to the extreme. After forcibly shaking Mr. 3 away, the other leg turned at a high speed, drawing a beautiful arc. Mr. 3 was about to fight back, but his eyes were dazzled by the slender fair legs, and he lost his mind for a moment. Call out. The domineering high-heeled shoes that covered the armed color and became extremely black fell, stepped on Mr. 3's chest, kicked him heavily, and smashed into a hill in the distance. A deep pit was formed, the gravel was tumbling, and the tumbling dust filled the air, covering all sight. Before the smoke and dust cleared, Hancock, who landed again, charged towards the direction of Mr. 3. The black and white beautiful figure galloped out, and broke out with the firm Mr. 3 in a fist-to-body duel. Sizzle sizzle. The dark red arc raged in the battle circle of the two, raging domineeringly, forming a terrifying energy storm. Almost at the same time, both Mr. 3 and Hancock started the initial stage of overlord color burning. After several times of systematic strengthening, combined with the comprehended fighting skills, sword skills and mace skills, the current Mr. 3 is not inferior to the veteran strongman Hancock in terms of pure physical confrontation. Even the absolute gap between the two in terms of combat experience was evened out by the proficiency of the overlord color burning. Therefore, Mr. 3 can fight Hancock for 3 days and 3 nights without using the fruit ability and domineering one-on-one. Of course, the opponent he needs to deal with now is not just Hancock, who is evenly matched. In the distance, Buggy in the big red robe let out a strange laugh, and when he found the right moment, he attacked decisively, split into fine dust and flew out, and quietly regrouped behind Mr. 3. Ha ha ha. It can be regarded as being caught by Lao Tzu, and you will pay the price for not using the arrogance of predicting the future, Mr. 3. Taking advantage of the stalemate between Mr. 3 and Hancock, the white-gloved palm flew out and pressed firmly on Mr. 3's back, completely releasing the awakened ability of the fruit torn apart. Mr. 3 punched Hancock flying with a backhand, and when he was about to punch Buggy, who was overwhelmed, his body began to shatter as if it had been cut by countless blades. Even the human body will be affected by assimilation. Is this the torn fruit after awakening? What surprised Mr. 3 was that despite the uncontrollable splitting of his body, hands and feet, he could still clearly feel the existence of each part. This effect is somewhat similar to Trafalgar's room space, and this is precisely the metamorphosis of the torn fruit. It's a pity that this split cannot be manipulated as one wishes. Mr. 3 sighed regretfully. If this kind of idea can be realized, then he can be regarded as half a divided person. Boom. Under Buggy's unbelievable gaze, Mr. 3's eyes were fixed, and a ferocious domineering aura erupted from his body, completely dispelling the fragmented effect, and all body parts reunited and returned to their original positions. In the face of absolute domineering, any fruit ability will be weakened until it becomes useless. A monster-like terrifying aura enveloped Buggy, and he repeated his tricks, trying to evade the attack by tearing his body apart. However, Mr. 3's ever-increasing arrogance greatly limited the speed at which he could split. Candle Dragon. The gray wax liquid squirmed, forming 3 hideous candle dragons behind Mr. 3. Wait, 3, wait for me to prepare a puff. The flickering of the candle flame made the roaring candle dragon more ferocious, drowning Buggy, who begged for mercy on the spot. Boom. There was a loud explosion, and white smoke rolled up. Good job, President Buggy. The corner of Hancock's mouth raised slightly, his whole body was shrouded in a dark red energy halo, turning into an afterimage and rushing towards Mr. 3. Buggy's defeat happened in the blink of an eye. Although it was not worth mentioning, it also bought her the preparation time to raise her aura to the extreme in a disguised form. However, the speed at which Mr. 3 started to burn the overlord color far exceeded Hancock's expectations. The dark red arc jumped, and in the blink of an eye, it condensed into the same deep energy halo. Mr. 3, who was in full condition, was fearless, raised his foot and cracked the ground, and started a new round of more intense battles with Hancock, who appeared in front of him. Buggy, who broke free from the Candle Dragon's attack, gritted his teeth, and quickly swept out his floating upper body, participating in the fierce battlefield between the two, making side attacks and fighting for various opportunities for Hancock. Therefore, Ayasha, Shaki, Granny Zha, etc., who were watching the battle from a further distance, presented a very spectacular scene in front of them. In the torn world, wax splashes, pink lights flicker, and explosions sound one after another, fully interpreting the aesthetics of violence. The battle between the three lasted for more than 2 hours. The final result, of course, was that Mr. 3, who had lost his patience, directly started the stage of tyranny, crushing Buggy and Hancock, and hammering them into 2 shattered pits. Compared with other people, the domineering lectures with Buggy's participation seemed to be more profitable. Looking at the bruised and swollen Buggy in the gloomy Hancock, Mr. 3 had a strong smile on his face. You can clearly feel the improvement of the three-color domineering in your body, that is to say, this teaching is quite successful. After a brief wash, the three of them put on a new set of clothes and gathered in the highest standard conference hall in Nine Snake City. Third brother, please teach Zauba how to awaken the armed domineering. After being severely beaten, Buggy obviously lost his previous vigor, holding Mr. 3's calf and begging repeatedly, completely without the ferocious look of a crying kid on the reward list. Only Hancock, Ayasha, Shaki and Granny Z were present. All of them were people who could be trusted and didn't need to care about their image, so Buggy simply stopped pretending and directly asked his good brother Mr. 3 for advice. He was mediocre before, and he didn't have much thought. He just wanted not to be exposed, and stayed behind the scenes of the Cross Union as the boss. But after the battle on Hive Island and the successful awakening of the Devil Fruit ability, the lofty ambition to compete with Shanks in his youth sprouted again. For the first time in 10 years, he wants to become stronger. Hey, President Buggy, there are so many people watching, pay attention to your image. Looking at the saliva constantly smeared on the trouser legs, 10,000 muddy horses galloped past in Mr. 3's heart. I don't care. That bastard crocodile is fine. A guy like you who is greedy for life and afraid of death can have such a strong domineering. Why can't I? Buggy was relentless, and he went all out in order to become stronger. What the hell? Is this the tone of asking for help? Mr. 3 frowned, showing disdain. He doesn't think that a guy like Buggy can awaken the domineering arrogance. As the only intern who was favored by Roger the Pirate King, Buggy's life experience is probably not too simple, and he is born with a domineering aura. Not particularly unusual. But the point is, this guy's physique and awareness are really bad. If there is any trouble, he has already planned hundreds of ways to escape in his mind. How easy is it to awaken the domineering look? And even if there is a miracle of less than 1/10,000th, Buggy finally awakens the Overlord color after unremitting efforts, it will not be able to play a key role in improving his overall combat power. After all, if you haven't cultivated to the entanglement of Overlord color is just a skill that is simply used to pretend to be coercive and clear the minions. As strong as Hancock and Doflamingo, how could Buggy, who was already flawed in courage, be able to master this advanced skill after many years of immersion? That's the case with the domineering, let alone the burning of the domineering look later. It would be fine if they had several years or even 10 or 20 years, but the intensified conflicts between the cross-trade union and the world government have made it impossible to achieve such a long period of peaceful coexistence. Therefore, considering various factors, Mr. 3 seriously gives advice. Instead of chasing an uncertain domineering arrogance, Buggy, you might as well exploit your strengths and circumvent weaknesses like the Admiral of the Navy headquarters, and develop your fruit abilities to the extreme. Undoubtedly, Buggy's ability to disintegrate after awakening is so fierce that it even allowed him to advance by leaps and bounds from a weak chicken to the level where he can compete against the General Sawang in a short time. If you practice hard and delve into more possible moves, Buggy's ability will definitely be one of the most difficult and terrifying devil fruits. Hearing Mr. 3's serious tone, Buggy let go of his arms that tightly hugged the other's calf, squatted on the ground and began to think. Undoubtedly, after staying on Roger's ship, his vision is still quite high, and he has come into contact with powerful people of all kinds of strange things. The most iconic one is the legendary pirate Golden Lion. This guy's fruit ability is actually not strong, but under his use and development, he has shown a suppressive power that even Roger Whitebeard has to take seriously. After thinking for a long time, Buggy raised his head and looked at Mr. 3, who still had no idea. 3. What you said is so natural. Do you already have a good idea in your heart? After the words fell, Buggy's expression became more and more determined when he thought of Mr. 36 who used the 3 tricks to perfection. Hearing this, Hancock, Ayasha and others next to him also looked at them curiously. Actually, I'm not fully sure how far your fruit ability can go. Mr. 3 raised his hand and pushed the goggles, and said something incomprehensible to Buggy and others. However, if you can try to reduce the degree of division of objects to the level of microscopic particles that are difficult for the naked eye to capture, then the resulting lethality is absolutely beyond imagination. Yes, he was referring to nuclear fission. Although this process is definitely not easy to achieve, but considering the infinite possibilities of the devil fruit, with Buggy who can split everything in the world, there is a slight chance that this kind of thing can be done. Of course, he is not particularly clear about the principle of nuclear fission, so he can only provide Buggy with such a direction. Whether it can be done or not depends on luck and the limit that the torn fruit can reach. Thinking of the spectacular sight of a deep mushroom cloud rising slowly over Pangu City when the Holy Land is fully attacked in the future, Mr. 3 suddenly became excited, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up with excitement. At that time, maybe Buggy will become the #1 of the Crusades with a super wide range of strikes, far surpassing Kuzan, who has the ability to freeze fruits. Microscopic particles? Decomposition and fission? After listening to what Mr. 3 said, not to mention Buggy, who has always been stupid, even the well-informed Shaki and Granny Z felt very unfamiliar with these unheard-of words. Just like the 36 tricks, if there is no real example in front of them, it is impossible for them to understand the meaning of besieging Wei and saving Zhao, and playing hard to get. Mr. 3 is also very aware of how difficult it is for the natives living in the pirate world to understand nuclear fission, so he didn't say much, but stretched out a finger, using the fruit ability to condense a drop of dark gray wax. The specific principle is difficult to explain clearly. Buggy, just take this drop of wax and try it out, and break it down to the smallest degree as possible. Although the candles he created by relying on devil fruits are quite different from ordinary candles, in essence, the basic elements of the composition have not changed much, mainly composed of carbon and hydrogen. Lighter carbon and hydrogen elements are more suitable for nuclear fusion reactions than heavier uranium elements. But whether it is nuclear fission or nuclear fusion, the cutting and splitting of microscopic particles is also required, which has little effect on Buggy's challenge. The main reason for choosing the wax liquid as the research object is naturally Mr. 3, who has awakened the fruit ability, as quite skilled in controlling the precision of the candle, and can assist Buggy to carry out deeper division and aggregation. Thus, the first nuclear explosion, cooperation between the two brothers officially began. Buggy raised his hands and aimed his palms at the wax liquid suspended in midair with a high degree of concentration, gradually increasing the assimilation effect of fragmentation. At the same time, Mr. 3 slowly closed his eyes, and sensed the changes in the wax liquid on his fingertips with the help of extreme knowledge and arrogance. The surrounding environment immediately became silent and transparent, Hancock and others not far away, and even Buggy who was facing each other. All the auras gradually disappeared until they disappeared. Soon, in the world perceived by Mr. 3, only a fingernail-sized liquid wax remained. Cooperating with Buggy's fragmentation, he is also trying to decompose this drop of wax liquid into more detailed unit particles. The two devil fruit awakeners did their best to peel off the most basic structural form of the candle layer by layer. In the field of vision of Hancock, Shaki, and Granny Z, the wax liquid suspended on Mr. 3's fingertips first shook and twisted violently, and then scattered and splashed. Immediately afterwards, a faint white light emanated from the center of the wax liquid, which intensified as time passed, and finally formed a dazzling brilliance like the sun. You can feel the huge energy from it. What kind of fission power? Mr. 3 said, is it really going to succeed? Hancock frowned, disbelief written all over his beautiful face. As the pirate empress, she wandered along the Great Channel, and had seen countless wonderful and strange fruit abilities, but she never thought that the seemingly simple power of division would have such unexpected and terrifying power. It can only prove that this direction is feasible, and it is still far from success. Shaki stared intently at the blazing white light, folded his hands on his chest, and held a burning cigarette between the fingers of his right hand. As soon as her words fell, Buggy and Mr. 3 froze. In the next second, all the white light dissipated, and the remaining wax liquid was extinguished and turned into powder all over the sky. Obviously, this time the ability nuclear explosion was very successful and failed. Unfortunately, there is still one last step left. Mr. 3 clapped his hands lightly, with a slight smile on his lips. After this test, it proved that it is indeed very possible to use Buggy's fragmentation to create a nuclear explosion. And looking at the cute and disappointed Buggy, Mr. 3 stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. Buggy, remember the feeling just now? This is a very extraordinary fruit ability development move. Hearing this, Buggy had a bright red nose, showing a puzzled expression. Didn't they completely fail just now? Even if it is really possible to realize it, it must cooperate with Mr. 3, neither of them can be separated. Mr. 3 coughed lightly, and explained. Aside from whether the fragmentation can create a super big explosion, don't you think that the attack of cutting matter into fine powder just now is a very powerful killing move? Since you need contact to use fragmentation and assimilation on the enemy, what if you split a part of your body and radiate the surroundings in a way similar to white light? Split body. Rapid radiation. Buggy's talent in combat is not very good, but he has a lot of experience. Soon, his mind was completely opened, and his eyes lit up. That's right. Why didn't I expect to have such an attack method? The more Buggy thought about it, the more excited he became. He couldn't wait to turn around, raised his arms high, clenched his fists, and swung violently at the concrete wall of the reception hall. Call out. The fist wearing white gloves exploded out of thin air, shattered into fine particles, and turned into a white torrent of bombardment. Boom. The moment the white torrent touched the wall, the disintegrating assimilation effect bloomed, and the seemingly solid concrete stones immediately shattered like foam and disappeared into nothingness. When Buggy withdrew his split fist and everyone looked up, a hollow with a smooth-cut surface appeared on the flat wall. It was a miracle, comparable to the slash of a top swordsman. Ahahaha. I'm so strong. Buggy put his hands on his hips, raised his head and laughed wildly, quite satisfied with this unique attack method. Swinging a punch at will has this effect. What if he splits his fist into 2 planes, or even 3-dimensional space? That is simply cutting everything within the range, and there is no way to restrain it except domineering over oneself. Huh. Domineering over oneself. Smiling and laughing, Buggy, who realized his weakness, was depressed again. Compared with the General Si Huang, who is as strong as a monster, his domineering aura is not worth mentioning at all. Mr. 3 next to him immediately saw through his thoughts, and comforted him. It's very good to be able to do this. Besides, during the battle on Hive Island, your fruit ability can't even match the domineering power of Blackbeard Kina. Split? After a pause, Mr. 3's eyes flickered. In other words, practice more to make your fruit ability stronger. Buggy, you will be invincible in the world. These words made Buggy's decadent eyes light up again. So 3, do you have any efficient methods for this exercise? It's simple. Mr. 3 narrowed his eyes slightly, revealing a sinister smile that made Buggy shudder. The more you practice against me, the more you get beaten, the stronger you will naturally be. The corner of Buggy's mouth twitched, and he cursed angrily. I know that your mother's Galdino is uneasy and good-hearted, going around and co-authoring it just to beat me up as much as possible. Find a reasonable explanation, right? Mr. 3 shrugged irresolutely. Being able to maximize the effect of the third brother's domineering lecture hall, and taking the opportunity to practice the candle nuclear explosion, which is far more powerful than Kaiduo's mother's fusion skill, Bahai, and can also bully and beat Buggy. The best of all 3 things, why not do it? Before Buggy could respond, a coolly dressed 9-snake female warrior hurried over from outside the hall. Master Shiji, third brother, today's news and your latest reward list have all been updated. The world is shocked. The War of the 4 Emperors. The conspirators in the dark were completely defeated by the light of the cross. The era has changed. The strong contend for the front, inheriting the will of One Piece Roger and the hegemony of Whitebeard. This era is called Red Nose. Shock. The second in command of the Crusaders Guild, the Candle Demon Army, actually did this kind of thing to Blackbeard on Hive Island. The newspapers were filled with bright red headlines, and almost 90.00% of the sections were related to the epic battle between the Cross Union and the Blackbeard Pirates. Thanks to Morgans, the president of the World Economic News, who risked his life to collect materials, the photos of the 5 major battlefields of the 2 pirate groups of the 4 emperors are all presented, especially the confrontation between the 4 emperors and the generals, which is enough to shock the New World all forces. Including the Navy headquarters and even the world government, they all need to obtain many details of this life and death battle of the top pirates from the newspapers published by Morgans. To their surprise, the secrets revealed in the newspaper were more about the trinity of Blackbeard brothers and sisters, Douglas Barrett's fierce and crazy fighting style, and the unknown methods of many cadres of the Black Group. There are few cadre secrets related to the Victor's Cross, and they are repeated over and over again. Only Buggy, who stands in the center of the divided world, and Mr. 3, who makes a strong debut and turns the tide of the battle through candle clones, have a little reference value. In fact, if the 2 photos weren't too shocking and the news effect exploded, Morgans, who has a close relationship with the Cross Union, would want to help the Cross Union hide more secrets within the scope of his authority. At this time, the influence of public opinion that Mr. 3 has valued a long time ago has profoundly shown its effect. The entire news incident is all inclined to the Cross Union, which makes the prestige and influence of the name of the clown King Buggy in this sea reach an unprecedented strength. Morgans is really a good partner. After probably reading the whole news, Mr. 3 nodded quite satisfied. After all, it is the shrewd and cunning president of the news agency. Morgans personally reviewed this newspaper. Under the premise of ensuring the authenticity of the news, all the information and photos are beneficial to the subsequent development of the cross-union. On the other side, Buggy, holding the latest reward list in his hand, was so excited that his head floated high to the ceiling. 4.5 billion, 4.5 billion. Damn, my bounty has finally surpassed that bastard Shanks. Ha 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 ha. When I return to Kale Bali, I must call Morgan's. Even if I pay for it myself, I will print an extra 100 copies of this reward list. Ah, no, 1,000 copies. Let Shanks take a good look. Who is the big brother now? Buggy's laughter was almost insane, and his movements were even more exaggerated, pulling the big red robe on his body and creating a hurricane. The turbulent airflow rose from the ground, blowing the arrest warrants placed on the ground into the air, filling the entire reception hall. The latest bounty offered by all the members of the Crusade Union immediately appeared in Mr. Three's field of vision. The President Qianliang turned into the clown Huang Buggy, offering a reward of 4.5 billion. The photo is a red robe floating in the center of the torn-apart world. The captain of the first team, Mr. 3, Candle Demon Army Master, has a bounty of 3.9 billion. The photo is a cloak fluttering, standing on the bow of a pirate ship. The vice captain of the first team, Ayasha, the Witch of Evil, has a bounty of 900 million Baileys. The captain of the second team, Boa Hancock, the Queen of Pirates, has a bounty of 2.8 billion. The captain of the third team, Sand Crocodile, has a bounty of 2.3 billion. The captain of the fourth team, Whitey Edward Weevil, has a bounty of 1.8 billion. The captain of the fifth team, Amayasha Doflamingo, has a bounty of 1.9 billion. The captain of the sixth team, Moonlight Mariah, has a bounty of 1.5 billion. The captain of the 40th team, the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk, has a bounty of 3.8 billion. Captain of the 8th Division, former Admiral Kuzan of the Navy Headquarters, has a bounty of 3.7 billion. In addition, in the reward list updated by the Cross Guild this time, there are 3 or 4 powerful big pirates, and the reward is close to 1 billion, reaching the level of a senior cadre of the ordinary 4 Emperor pirates. Judging from the reward list alone, the Cross Guild is definitely in this era, far surpassing the Red Hair Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates, and is well deserved the strongest 4 Emperors. The desperate amount shocked the whole world. Even the most powerful pirate hunters could only stay away, hiding in a corner and shivering. With a pirate group of this size, apart from the Navy and the world government, there is no single force that can confront it. And as long as one of them is moved, what needs to be faced later will be the crazy revenge of the entire cross-union. In other words, the bounty is simply a threat index to the cadres of the cross-union. More than 2.8 billion, not bad, Hancock, you have successfully broken the highest bounty in the history of our Amazon Lily Kingdom. The legendary pirate Shaki held Hancock's reward list between his fingers, took a puff of cigarette casually, and looked at Hancock with relief in his eyes. As the former captain of the 9 Snake Pirates, she, like her mother-in-law, has witnessed Hancock's growth throughout the process. Compared to those 2 men, this level is far from enough. Hancock raised his hand and brushed aside the hair on his side face, and glanced at Buggy and Mr. 3 not far away. A sense of aloofness exuded from the depths of his beautiful eyes. Having said that, it is not difficult to see from the slightly raised corner of her mouth that she is quite satisfied with this reward. At least, taller than that nasty sand crocodile, isn't it? All right, Buggy, it's just that the bounty is higher than that of Shanks. If you really have that ability, you can find someone to fight one-on-one now. Mr. 3 shouted to Buggy, who was getting more and more inflated in the air. Hearing this, Buggy's arrogant face instantly changed color, and he stared at Mr. 3 with gloomy and resentful eyes. Bastard Galdino, if you have nothing to do, just shut your stinky mouth to me. Don't look at Buggy's red-haired madness when he has nothing to do, but he still has a little bit of self-knowledge about the strength gap between the two at this stage. That's it. Mr. 3 raised his middle finger on the spot, maximizing the taunt value. 3. This is forcing me. Buggy's face was extremely gloomy. Suspended in the air, he raised his arms without hesitation, and his fists turned into powder and quickly dissipated. Killing people, he wants to entertain, the killing move he learned from Mr. 3's suggestion. Since you want another beating so soon, I'm happy to oblige. Mr. 3 laughed at that time. The two confronted each other, ready to fight. Then, 2 clear and crisp sounds came out unexpectedly. What do you want to do to the 9 Snake City I just built? With flaming eyes, Hancock stepped on his long legs and punched Mr. 3 and Buggy's heads with one punch. Mr. 3 and Buggy looked at each other, and after deeply feeling Hancock's terrifying aura, they covered their heads and hugged each other, and shouted in unison very politely, "I'm very sorry. I'm really sorry." Regardless of strength and status, the coercion of the pirate empress is undoubtedly revealed at this moment. In just one day, the news of the explosion of information spread throughout the pirate world, and the reputation and prestige of the Cross Guild rose, becoming a hot topic of discussion among major forces. This extremely lively wave is not over yet, and the news that the Cross Union is about to establish a pirate kingdom centered on Kale Bali once again attracted everyone's attention. In an instant, countless central pirate groups requested to be merged one after another, wanting to become pirates under the Cross Guild and serve the great Buggy God. Mr. 3 naturally did not refuse this kind of combat power delivered to the door. The insignificant Xiao Xiami recruited directly, and the middle and high-level powerhouses were involved, and Ayasha and the vicious crocodile Kuzan would check it out. Even to ensure nothing goes wrong, Mr. 3 will also send the Devil Fruit ability development capsule obtained by successfully defeating the Blackbeard pirates to Ayasha to speed up the awakening of his fruit ability. There are 3 development capsules rewarded by the system, and the other 2 are given to Hancock and Buggy respectively. The ability of the sweet fruit combined with Hancock's alluring beauty is quite a bug in itself. After awakening, the power will definitely be improved to a higher level, making Hancock fully possess the super strength of the 4 emperors. According to Buggy, although the ability to split the fruit has been awakened, it is not difficult to see from the previous nuclear explosion test that there is still room for growth. Considering the super lethality of nuclear explosions, even if the effect of developing capsules is not great, it is definitely worth a try. As for why not concentrate the 3 fruit ability development capsules on one person, Mr. 3's consideration is to make their strength increase more gradually, so as not to cause too much impact on their mentality. Moreover, this can also avoid being suspected by the world government, causing unnecessary chain reactions and troubles. Now is not the best time for an all-out war to break out, and insignificant development is the right way. Undercurrents are surging in the New World. After the reward list of the Cross Trade Union was released, the world government and the Navy headquarters did not take any other actions, let alone sanction the Cross Trade Union that had become a threat. The Revolutionary Army that blocked Admiral Akainu Sakaski also died down, hiding in the darkness again, and no longer being active. The 3 parties seem to have reached a tacit agreement, and they are living in peace, maintaining a balance for the time being. Although only a few people know the truth about the final destruction of the Hive Island, all forces are well aware that after this strange silence, there will be a violent storm sweeping the entire world. There were different opinions outside, and all kinds of speculations emerged, but inside the Cross Union, it was solid and unmoved. With the arrival of the entire fleet of the technological powerhouse Germa 66, under the leadership of Mr. 3, the Cross Union began to build the One Piece Kingdom. Based on the opinions and ideas of major cadres, 3 islands are initially planned and constructed, with Kale Bali as the center and extending in 3 directions, southeast, west and east. In addition to the new daughter country Blazing Island located in the north of Bali, the 4 islands will be connected together with a cross sign, which is very convenient for defense against the enemy or support transfer, and presents a very stable structure to the outside world. After a week of hard work, at the cost of consuming an eternal wax museum, Mr. 3 successfully created the candle foundations and basic outlines of the 3 islands. For the rest of the main island, Crocodile, who needs the ability of rustling fruit, and Kuzan, who has the ability to freeze the fruit, will cooperate with some Devil Fruit ability users recruited by the Cross Guild for joint construction. The final infrastructure is in charge of the Germa Kingdom, which has advanced technological means. The advantage of the snail warship country that can be broken into parts is fully displayed at this time. They can disperse and transform and build 3 brand new islands at the same time. When the construction task of the One Piece Kingdom was in full swing, an inconspicuous pirate ship sailed quietly, heading towards the destination under the guidance of the permanent pointer. On the deck, 3 figures with different bodies and physiques stood side by side. It's Mr. 3, Hancock and the big fat Moonlight Mariah. It's almost like this. Our main purpose of this trip to Wano country is to investigate the possible secrets of the ancient weapon Pluto. Mr. 3 let the refreshing sea breeze blow on his face, raised his hand and pushed the goggles, and said to Hancock and Mariah, "So, try not to conflict with the local warriors." As the closest partner of Beast Kaido, Doflamingo knows more or less the connection between Wano country and the ancient weapon Pluto. After all, it is a terrifying battleship that claims to be able to destroy an island with one blow, and it is very similar to the superweapon that destroyed the Hive Island. So when Mr. 3 heard the news from Doflamingo, he made up his mind to go to Wano country. This is the core goal. In addition, I also want to revisit Moriya's old place and recall the scene of Kaido's disastrous defeat in Wano country. Although this is a bit cruel, it is the most effective way for Moriya to regain his belief in invincibility and complete side missions. At the same time, Mr. 3 also has a strong interest in the location where the decisive battle between Mr. Kai and Nika Luffy broke out in the original book, and he wants to travel around for a while, by the way. Take action for Countless Jaime, and beat up a certain 4 yellow character who must die. Wano country, it's such a hot place just thinking about it. Moriya looked at the sea horizon in the distance, clenched his fists, and unconsciously appeared in front of his eyes the scene of being defeated and fleeing like a bereaved dog. The hard-working pirate group was beaten to pieces, and none of them survived. This is the pain of his life. If it's just like this, you two can solve it. Why do you want to call me a concubine? Hancock crossed his legs and sat down on the pink python Salome behind him. The rumored Wano country samurai has strong combat power. After all, Wano country is not our territory. Even I dare not take big risks. Mr. 3 coughed lightly, and said words against his will without blushing. Having a powerful combat force like you following him will make people feel much more at ease. The actual reason is naturally not the case. The cooling time of the Eternal Wax Museum is over. With the ability to do 3 sit-ups, he is fearless even in the face of the world's strongest creature Kaido. What's more, the current Wano country doesn't even have a real 4 emperors fighting power. It's very simple, what he's looking for is Hancock's almost unsolvable fruit ability. With the ultimate temptation of beauty, it will be much easier to investigate Wano country's intelligence. Although Mr. 3 has a lot of means, but he is more afraid of trouble, so he gave priority to the most simple and rude way. If you say this, don't say that I don't believe it, even you can't convince yourself. Hancock rolled his eyes, his cold tone was full of contempt. You are so afraid of death, why don't you bring a stronger Mihawk or Kuzan? Having said that, Hancock did not expose Mr. 3's sinister intentions on the spot, because this is her recognized and reliable partner. If you say it that way, I understand. Compared to Hancock's tacit understanding, Mariah nodded, showing a satisfied and self-conscious smile. With the reliable combat power following me like this, Mr. 3, you can rest assured. No, it's purely to make up the number with you, Mr. 3 said with a deadpan face. Hearing this, Mariah's mouth twitched, his anger soared, and his mentality almost collapsed. What did you say? With the emergence of a large island standing on the sea level at the end of the field of vision, Mr. 3 and others successfully reached the surrounding waters of Wano country. The normal way to enter the Wano country is to ride the seawater like an ink painting, rush up the rapids against the current, and reach the inland sea above. However, this conventional method of entering the country is too troublesome. After some thinking, Mr. 3 finally chose a more convenient way. Wings of liberty grew out of his back, and he brought Hancock and Mariah directly into Wano country from high altitude. Wano country, the most prosperous capital of flowers, the general's mansion. The current general, Kazuki Momonosuke, is sitting in the main hall, discussing with the red-scabbard samurai who are facing the ceremony of the Lord, discussing many matters concerning the rebuilding of the Wano country. After the tragic Battle of Ghost Island, 2 of the famous Red Sheath 9 heroes sacrificed their lives, and now only 7 remain. Click click. Suddenly, the loud and piercing sound of clogs came from the corridor outside, and the door of the lobby was pushed open, attracting the attention of everyone present. The visitor was tall and tall, wearing a white sleeveless close-fitting kimono with blue patterns on the kimono and 2 diamond patterns on the chest. She has a pair of red devil horns on her head, her hair is tied into a ponytail at the back of her head, and there are 2 orange hairpins. There are gold earrings on both ears, and the huge shimenawa tied around his waist is shaking as he runs fast. Momonosuke, and everyone in Akasaka, when I was wandering the streets just now, I felt a very terrifying aura. Yamato was holding a mace, his muscles were tense, his brows were furrowed, and his expression was extremely solemn. There is a monster comparable to the great General 4 Emperors, who has come to Wano country. One word stirred up 1,000 layers of waves, and the expressions of the Red Sheath warriors headed by Kazuki Momonosuke suddenly changed drastically. Wano country has just experienced a great battle not long ago, and has just come out of the shadow of Kaido, the 4 emperors and beasts. Now that this kind of news, which is very bad at first glance, comes again, it is difficult for them to keep calm. Ah? Yes. Did Kaido kill him again? The grown-up Momonosuke couldn't help tightening the saber around his waist, His heart was beating wildly, and his voice was trembling. He once vowed to use his own strength to protect the country of Wano, and made it his lifelong goal. But when the news of the powerful enemy's attack reached his ears, Kaido's terrifying nightmare-like appearance unconsciously appeared in front of his eyes, and his immediate reaction was to flinch and escape. No, I know that guy's aura very well, and this one is a strange and strong man that has never appeared before. As soon as Yamato's voice fell, a deep and terrifying domineering erupted from overseas, deterring the entire flower capital. Ignoring the details with Momonosuke and the Red Sheath Samurai, Yamato turned and rushed outside, jumped from the top of the general's mansion, and rushed along the street to the place where the domineering came from. Momonosuke stared blankly at the direction where Yamato disappeared. After a period of intense struggle, his courage finally defeated the fear of the mysterious strongman, and he rushed to the battlefield with the Red Sheath warrior surging with fighting spirit. I even faced Admiral Green Bull head-on. Even if Kaido returns, there is nothing to be afraid of. He consoled himself so much in his heart. At the same time, the empty plains outside the capital of flowers. Mr. 3, Hancock, and Mariah, who successfully boarded the country, are walking slowly. Mr. 3's eyes were sharp, and circles of dark red arcs burst out from time to time around his body. The black and blue cloak behind him moved without wind, and every time he took a step, the ground under his feet cracked and was covered with dense cracks. Just releasing the breath can cause irreversible damage to the surrounding environment. This is the direct manifestation of domineering arrogance at the extreme stage substantial destruction. Is it really okay to show such unreserved arrogance? For a warrior kingdom, this is the most arrogant and direct provocation. Hancock next to him rolled his eyes and glanced at Mr. 3, didn't you say try not to conflict with them? That's another matter. Mr. 3 smiled heartily, the timid way of appearing on the stage is not at all in line with the name of our 4 emperor pirates. After all, he raised his eyes and happened to be able to see the huge pirate flag fluttering in the wind on the tallest building in the Flower City. It is not difficult to see from the iconic straw hat that it is the flag of the Straw Hat Pirates. That is to say, after defeating Mother Kaido in the Onijima War, did Luffy give Wano country asylum in the way of pirates? Mr. 3 silently made a judgment. The period he traveled through was at the end of the World Conference and when Luffy Kaido's fierce battle was in full swing, so he didn't know the final detailed development of the Ghost Island War. However, considering the final result of Fishman Island, this situation is really normal and does not affect his trip to Wano country. Hey, there's something in front that's approaching quickly. Relying on the advantage of height, Moria looked up and was the first to discover Yamato, who was in a state of running wildly and billowing smoke and dust. With a ferocious breath like a beast rushing towards his face, Hancock took a step forward expressionlessly, trying to stop this unknown strong man. Through the iconic devil's horns and costumes, Mr. 3 immediately recognized the identity of the comer, and walked out quickly to stop Hancock's actions. Let me come, Hancock, if I'm not mistaken, that guy should be Kaido's daughter. Sensing the turbulent fighting intent of Mr. 3, who raised his mouth slightly, Hancock stopped in a cooperative manner, and couldn't help but wonder, Kaido's daughter? Shouldn't Kaido leave Wano country now? Click, click, click. The sound of clogs trampling on the ground quickly approached. Yamato's eyes were fixed on the opposite side, the strong man from the sea with a strange hairstyle. As the distance continued to shorten, one could clearly feel that the domineering aura bloomed by the other party was extremely strong, almost substantive. Its sense of oppression is not weaker than that of Daddy Kaido. Yamato didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. While running fast, his figure changed, with ghostly horns raised on his head, long hair flowing, and bluish-white flame ribbons swirling all over his body. Under the heavy pressure, she directly opened her strongest posture, dog fruit phantom beast species big-mouthed true god human beast form. Tough men from overseas, although I don't know the purpose of your visit to Wano country, but you are not welcome here now, please go back. Running to Mr. 3, Yamato stomped on the ground and leapt high, holding the golden mace that was surging with dark thunder with both hands. The strong wind whipped up by the violent impact made the cloak on Mr. 3's back fluttering. Is this how the reborn Wano country treats guests from afar? He smiled softly, opened his arms leisurely, and shouted, sword. Whoosh. 2 off-white candle swords were formed out of thin air, and under the cover of the armed color domineering, they became as black as ink. Although the sword skills inherited from Lion Ricky's training are quite limited, but it's more than a mistake to say hello to Yamato, who has not yet reached the peak of his strength. Swordsman with 2 swords? Yamato's pupils shrank at high altitude. Without much time to think, she stepped on the air after completing the charged blow. From top to bottom, she rushed towards Mr. 3 at a super high speed that was difficult to catch with the naked eye. Take it. Thunder gossip. The dark red lightning exploded, and the powerful attack fell like a meteor. A deep red light flashed in Mr. 3's eyes as the strong wind hit, and after capturing Yamato's attack trajectory, he resolutely crossed his swords in front of him. Almost at the moment when he completed his defensive action, the mace with added violence and arrogance fell down violently. Boom. The sword blade and the tip of the stick collided firmly, dark thunder surged, and the turbulent and violent air current tore the ground apart. Even the surrounding space was shaken by this violent impact, making roaring sounds. It's really good power. Is this the effect of the blessing of the Phantom Beast Devil Fruit? A large amount of wax liquid emerged from Mr. 3's feet to relieve the impact, easily blocked Yamato's charged blow, and at the same time made comments calmly. It's so easy to accept my thunderous gossip. Suddenly, Yamato's frowning brows relaxed, and a wanton smile slowly emerged from the corner of his mouth. That's great, are you a pirate too? Through the most straightforward domineering collision, she clearly felt the opponent's will. Pure, fierce, and weird, but it doesn't carry much hostility. This ridiculously strong man in front of him is not the enemy of Wano country.